That's recording.
1, 2, 3.
So we've got 12 hours on that memory card. Make sure.
Carly, what's this?
Upgrades. If I hear one more person complain about our audio.
Look, this wouldn't be your little overreaction to the fact that you completely screwed up the audio last week and we had to use the in-camera audio because the microphones didn't work. That's not what this is it?
I screwed up.
Oh. Well, when I went to do the edit, the good audio was nowhere to be found.
I will call this internet gremlins, and I swear to God they are just trying to test my patience because everything is set up, everything's plugged in, everything's on, and then something happens. And I don't find out until the end when we're editing, and then I just
the gremlins get you.
Last week.
So this is, I believe we owe this because it is very cool and I like it, but I believe we owe it to G.
We owe this to the best boyfriend in the world. He really is. Like he is not one for like on the cameras, but behind the scenes. He's so thorough.
G, you're the best boyfriend I've ever had.
Yeah.
This
is like a polyamorous relationship.
Look, let's move on. It's already weird enough. Good news for the week. I also have some gear-related news.
Oh, excellent.
It's not quite as impressive. I bought this.
It's a USB-C cable?
It's a USB-A to USB-C. And I could not find one in my house for love nor money, so I had to go and buy one. The purpose being, you remember me lamenting about how I would get on the train with a battery that said 100% and I would arrive here with a battery that said 5%?
Yes, you did.
I lament no more. I have not had to plug my phone in whilst I've been here because I stepped off the train with a fully charged phone.
Technology.
Thanks to this cable. So that's my little technology-related news.
Yay for you.
Yeah.
My good news is I have merch, but not merch.
You're branded.
I am branded.
And I do like that logo.
This is my Carlz Soda photography logo.
Yeah,
but
that is cool.
The back. So, this is the biggest thing that I have realised. Having to get up and go to work and having to decide what to wear every day, it drives me crazy. I just want to wear a uniform. And with what I do, I get so dirty, setting up things, packing things in, lying on the floor, climbing up in a tree, whatever I'm doing. I was like, I can't wear nice clothes. I'd love to wear a nice fancy pantsuit, but that's not practical. So I made merch. It's actually really funny. Read it.
So it says photographer, 100% real, 0% can you Photoshop that. Ingredients, 35% vision and composition, 25% obsession with lighting, 15% technical mastery, 10% caffeine dependency, only 10, wow. 10% uncontrolled perfectionism, and 5% unexplainable luck. Warning, editing sessions may result in a 2 a.m. existential crisis. Handle with care, sensitive to bad lighting, fueled by coffee late nights and unrealistic client expectations. That is a brilliant top. Every photographer needs one of those.
Oh, it's so I wore it to a meeting yesterday, and there was about 50 people in the room, and I could feel eyes on me, and I totally forgot what I was wearing. And I was like, why do I feel
it takes
my bum?
It takes a little while to read because people will be like, and it's good. I want to keep reading it.
And then funny enough, there's a QR code on there, and I'm pretty anti the QR code, but I was like, you know what, let's see what happens. People read it, and then they did scan it, and my website hits have gone up. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I will say it does seem a little redundant to have the word photographer on your back when you've got bags of gear and 2 cameras with massive lenses hanging off your sides.
Just in case anyone was curious what I was up to.
Yeah, it's what do you do for a living? Yeah.
Yeah, obvious.
Yeah.
But what was I say? Yeah, so I just wanted something that looked cool, and now I've had all these photographers reach out and go, hey, can I have one? I was like...
That is a very, very cool top.
Thank you. Yeah, it's clever. But yeah, that's why people are looking at my ass. Anyway, lots to talk about today. Lots to talk about. I actually really struggle putting these notes together. I'm like, I just need the world to slow down.
Still getting used to it. Sorry.
This is your new thing.
That's my nicotine hit.
It looks like an adult,
I need drugs to be able to cope with talking to you for 2 hours. Yeah.
That's what she said to me. How is this vape going? It looks like a giant pacifier for adults.
Look, it is. Essentially, it is. I make no apology or excuse for the fact that this is a comforting device.
Okay.
That's what it is. It delivers nicotine, but it's also a comforting device. I like it. What I've discovered is when I'm in the zone and I'm trying to bang out a lot of work, because I'm working long hours at the moment, where my brain used to want a distraction and I would get up and go and do something and it would take minutes out of my hour or sometimes turn into a much bigger distraction. Now when my brain is crying out for that little momentary break, all I actually have to do is reach for this, do this, put it down, and then I'm good to go again. I have no idea. I cannot separate to what degree are the benefits real and to what degree are they psychosomatic? How much of this is just the placebo effect? I don't know, but it is having a positive effect, and I'm going to stick with it.
You know, even if it's placebo, if it works, it works.
Correct.
For me, it's like I cannot start my day without a 20-minute walk, and what that walk does is, like, I've watched probably too much Andrew Huberman, right? You know, like the whole morning routine thing.
Yeah.
He's like, get the sunlight in your eyes, set your circadian rhythm, get your blood moving. And I definitely notice it when I don't do that. I feel really stagnant.
Yeah.
And actually, the biggest thing that I have done for my business recently is I signed up to a co-working space.
Right, okay.
So my best mate, Sally, who's also a photographer, we both work from home. And this might start the next part of the podcast. But, like, I've been a business owner for 18 years now, and I've predominantly worked from home. And you just get used to it, but then you realise, like, oh my God, when you're out of this little cocoon that you are always in, you're so much more productive because there's less things to distract you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been really good.
Yeah, working from home has its advantages, but it definitely has its disadvantages. And I used to not understand business people who wouldn't take seriously anyone that worked from home, which is like, that's judgy, that seems unnecessary, that's just sort of pretentious and what have you. But I got to say, I do kind of get it a little bit more now. I mean, I say that as someone who primarily I work from home as well, but it has its place, it has its purpose. But for me, the whole morning thing, the morning rhythm, I can't wait for daylight savings to end because now I get up and it's an hour before sunrise. And I wake up at 5:30 by myself if you know, otherwise I'll sleep in till my alarm at 6. And I'm waiting an hour for the sun to come up.
Yeah. I will say, though, I'm so happy the mornings are cold. This is my favourite time of the year, autumn. Like, crisp, cold mornings, sun's still up during the day. And have you noticed that it's not boiling hot in this room? Yeah,
it's not boiling hot in this room, but also, see, autumn is better than spring because spring brings a lot of wind in this part of the world. You're down in Melbourne or even up where I am now, very windy in springtime. Autumn, much more settled. Perfect temperatures, beautiful crisp mornings, warm days, and still.
And I also have some pumpkins growing. So I'm a farmer now. So autumn, pumpkin, fall, pumpkin,
Gosh, I had no idea you'd gone into primary production.
Yeah, well, apparently that's going to be banned and outlawed soon. So I was like, I better get my green thumb going while I can. But I swear to God, pumpkins double overnight. I go outside and they're like... another day.
Yeah, the plants are crazy, but there's nothing to them. If you crush them, you realise they're just water weight. But then the pumpkins come along and boy, can they get out of control.
Well, I was worried because I was like, I don't want to plant one and only have like one pumpkin. So I was like, I'll plant 6.
You're going like Kent pumpkins or butternut pumpkins? Butternut,
Pretty sure they're butternut, but there's 6 different plants in there.
Yeah,
and it's like... bananas.
You do not have a big backyard. You do not have a yard big enough for 6 pumpkins, that's for sure.
Do not say that because I am working on getting chickens.
I didn't say that.
No, exactly. Take it right back. So the man who paid for all this...
Chickens are indoor pets, aren't they?
We need chickens.
Yeah.
So we've got a huge
I'm a big fan of my chickens. They give me their little butt nuggets every morning and I eat them the following day.
Correct. That's what I thought. I was like, I'm so sick of paying like freaking $10 for eggs and having to drive to 3 supermarkets to get them.
I never thought that having 6 poached eggs in the morning would be the definition of eating like a king, but it turns out it is.
Well, on this whole topic of this, there's so much hypocrisy coming from the progressive left and the climate activists. I was writing all this list down in front of us, and there's 2 massive stories that got me, and I want you to pick. But, actually, no, we've got to do something else.
Oh, yes, we do.
Hang on, I've got my thing here.
I need my notes.
You asked me to come to this podcast with 2 truths and a lie.
Yes. Are you familiar with that game? Like, it's like a party getting to know you game. You say 2 things about yourself that are outlandish but true, and a third thing that is equally outlandish but made up, and people have to try and figure out which one's which.
The issue with you and I is we know each other pretty well, so there's not a whole lot.
It's like, I got arrested during the COVID era for like defying the government. Well, yes, obviously that's true.
I had a video that went 40 million views wild around the internet, and then they cancelled.
And then they called you the Christopher Skase of Geelong. You know, you survived an earthquake in Japan. You've got one lung.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
I was offered $1 million by Dick Smith, and I said no. Like we know these stories about each other.
But they do sound outlandish.
They do. They sound ridiculous.
Isn't it funny when you look back over your life? You're like, there's some interesting moments there.
There's some interesting stuff. So I had to dig pretty deep.
All right, do you want to go first?
I was mulling this all week. I'll go first. I was mulling
this.
What
do I get if I get it right?
Oh, gosh, I didn't know we were playing like high stakes.
I'm competitive.
I don't know. Okay, suggest in the comments. You tell us in the comments, because you'll already know who lost. You've got to tell us what the punishment is.
All right.
Well, see how our brains work differently.
You said punishment, I said prize. Jesus Christ. All right, Stalin.
All right, so here's my things in no particular order. I love motorbikes.
Yes.
I've had a lot of motorbikes. That's
Yes.
not a mystery. So I bought my second motorbike entirely with poker winnings.
Okay.
I crashed my third motorbike at over 180 kilometres an hour coming out of the Southern Loop at the Phillip Island Raceway. Off the road, like it's not public road, so 180 kilometres an hour, not illegal. Or when I was a kid, my neighbours were taken hostage and the police, by their dad, and the police used our front room as their command centre. Most exciting night of my life.
Poker.
You're going with the poker. You don't want to ask any questions. You don't want to probe a little bit. You just go straight to the poker. I absolutely bought my second motorbike using poker winnings from playing the cash tables at Crank Casino.
There you go.
The lie was the motorbike crash. Now, I picked that particular lie because I've had a lot of crashes.
I was going to say, I know you've had a crash.
Yeah, I've had one big one and 3 little ones and 4 car crashes. That's just the motorbike, and then 4 car. You don't want to be in a vehicle with me.
So basically saying you shouldn't have a license.
Yeah, well, no, not all of them were my fault. But no, I have crashed at entirely legal speeds and been hospitalised down near Sale, and I've had 3 other crashes. 1 my fault, 2 I was hit. But no, I did not come off the motorbike at 160 kilometres an hour coming out of the Southern Loop at Phillip Island. In fact, I never crashed on a racetrack. I reserved my crashes for the open road.
Interesting. There you go. Yeah, the poker one, because I don't think I've ever heard you talk about playing poker.
Oh, no, I love poker. Love poker. But I don't talk about it much. You're quite right. And that's why I was like, I think that might just work.
You did stump me. All right.
All right. Okay, so I'm in the lead. I've taken an early lead here.
Mine are just so utterly ridiculous. So good luck. All right. So, I was Anubis, the god of the underworld in a past life. Anubis is
well, technicality. How do we verify that?
Well,
if you're making the claim that that's the true one, I'm not sure that I can.
Wow.
Okay. All right. Carry on.
I can hear colours, or I have been to every continent on this planet.
Golly gosh. Okay, hold on. You have travelled extensively. You are much more well-travelled than I am. I could believe that you've gone to every continent except Antarctica, but I don't believe you've mentioned Antarctica. I know you've been up into the North Pole and the Northern Lights, etc., in that direction. So that's a possible lie. That you can hear colours. I actually believe that. one. That you were Anubis in a past life. I don't even know how you would, like, by what definition of past life? Like, did you play Anubis in a previous play and you're saying, oh, it's my past life back when I was all artsy and I did theatre?
Well, I've never done theatre.
Okay, all right, well, that rules that one out. Look, I'm going to say that I'm about to say that you haven't been to every continent, which means I'm saying that you being Anubis in a past life is true, which is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever said in my entire life. But I'm going to call bullshit on you ever being into Antarctica.
And you would be correct.
Right. So what is this Anubis thing?
I knew this would stump you because it's so ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
What the hell? So, no, I haven't been to Antarctica. It's the only place that I'm desperate to go to.
Well done, me. I've been paying attention as I've listened to your travel stories.
Side note, I did like a little price up because it's my bucket list trip and you've got to go to Argentina and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I got this email
or get a really big slingshot and then you just don't have to stop.
Well, that or the other.
Yeah.
But I got this email the other day from like a photography expedition cruise, like 30 days. How much do you reckon a cruise to Antarctica via the Drake Passage from
They are phenomenally expensive. How long?
30 days all up.
Oh, gosh. So I was going to say 25 grand, but that's a long cruise. The 30-day cruise is a long time. I'm going to say 50 grand.
Yeah, it was about 50.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoop.
Yeah.
So that, like, you would have to have so much disposable cash to be like, 50, fuck it.
But over 30 days, the thing is, as a photographer, if you go for a short cruise and you don't get a good weather window, you've just wasted your money. So I would actually argue a 30-day cruise at 50 grand is probably better value.
100%. And the other thing is too, like, it's the candid nature of everything. Like, you know, you want to wait for the whales to pop up or the penguins or whatever.
Yeah. It's wildlife photography. You've got very little control.
Yeah.
And you want to get some southern lights to go with your northern lights. Okay, sorry, I can't hold on any longer.
Anubis.
What is this Anubis thing?
All right, so
what crazy person am I currently locked in a studio with?
Okay, so as you know, I have got some traumatic things that happened in my past, like proper accidents. And a good friend of mine is a hypnotherapist.
Okay.
And we were trying to work through some of that PTSD. And obviously you would have heard of the psilocybin trials.
Yes.
Psilocybin is obviously the active ingredient in
I would like to get onto a proper legal trial.
Yeah.
I'm not going to with my current criminal record as a known agitator and problem maker. I'm not going to jump on psilocybin without approvals. But if someone's doing a trial, I would like to know about it.
So it's really interesting, right? So the pharmaceutical companies are trying to synthesize psilocybin so that they can patent it whilst prohibiting natural psilocybin.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Now, if any of you guys have watched Joe Rogan, you've heard him talk about this, ayahuasca and DMT and all the things. Like, these are known things that our great ancestors have always used. And so I have never actually done a drug in my life. I don't say that to it's just never appealed to me. I've never even smoked a joint. I don't drink alcohol either. So I'm not someone that sort of has that experience being out of body. I've been high from morphine in hospital.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had
the green whistle?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Oh, when I had my jaw surgery, I had a mixture of tramadol and...
You mean after half the earth fell on your head?
No,
that one?
When I had my reconstruction, the night nurse, she was student nurse, gave me tramadol and endone, but only like a 2-hour window in between.
Yeah. They overlap them. Yeah,
and then
that's the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So that anyway. So my introduction into psilocybin, it was the organic way, and through a tea bag. And for about 45 minutes, I felt totally normal. And all of a sudden, you start to feel a bit weird. And this is the thing. When I talk about it, I can't use words that make... I sound crazy, right? When I say I felt like I was melting...
Saying that you have been Anubis in a past life doesn't sound crazy at all. There's nothing even slightly weird about that sentence.
Wait, it gets way weirder. Anyway, so I think this is really important to talk about because I was very anti-drug. I'm literally the party police. I'm like, no drugs, no MDMA, none of that cocaine nonsense. Like, Melbourne's the cocaine capital.
Yeah.
I turn my nose up it, and if I'm really honest, I do look down at people.
It's so when Dan Andrews said get on the beers, what people didn't realise, he just mispronounced the sentence. It was meant to be the nose beers.
Yeah, 100%, which is what most of Melbourne are on anyway.
Well, it's certainly what Dan was in his younger years.
Yeah, 100%.
And I can say that because if he challenges me to go into court about it, I've got the proof.
Ha! There you go. It wouldn't surprise me. Loves a dart, that man, too.
Yeah, doesn't want a durry.
But yeah, so basically what happens is, like, I've done 5 journey bags, progressively getting more and more and more. And then you do what they call a hero dose, which is a lot. I want to say it's 5 grams, I think, which is a lot.
I don't know what that means, but okay, yep.
So I'm someone that actually has chromesthesia, which is I can hear...
So many words that I don't know.
Basically, I can see and hear things totally differently to normal people, right? So essentially, I can hear colours.
Can I comment on this for a second?
Yeah.
I didn't bring it up last week because I thought this is just too nerdy and too weird.
Okay.
You've heard me talk about how music is architecture and architecture is music, okay? I'm not going to redo that. But do you realise that we can see less than 1 octave?
Yeah.
You know how an octave of music, you reach the same note 1 octave up. Our eyesight is obviously seeing different frequencies of light. We can see less than 1 octave. And I would love to know, for example, what is the colour purple 1 octave up or 1 octave down?
This is my whole psilocybin thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? So I already have this and I knew this because, like, I just see colours totally different. Like, when the, I was going to say the northern lights, when the southern lights were here May last year, not May, it was the October or something. Anyway, I said to Jim, like, we've got to get up, we've got to go see the lights. And we're standing there, it's pitch black dark, and he's looking up, he's like, what the hell are you talking about? It's black. I'm like, the sky is pink. He's like, you're crazy. And I take a photo with my camera, he's like, oh, damn, the sky is pink. Like, he can't see it.
Yeah.
Or I'll point to something, I'll be like, oh, the blue thing is like the blue. You mean the grey? I'm like, it's blue. But it's one of those things, like, I think it's just a perceptive thing. It's just basically a different neuro pathways.
That's why you're a photographer and he's not.
And it's just one of those things. And, like, when I say I can hear colours, like, certain sounds trigger a colour memory for me. So, for example, like, if I hear an ear-piercing siren, it's red. And, like, I see red. Literally, I see it. And it's just, it's a weird phenomenon. The other people have got it, like Kanye West. Not that that's a good example.
So what I'm not hearing is I was Anubis.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that might have a reason to do with why psilocybin affected me so much. So the first couple of times, like, you sort of regress through your memory. It's like, the only way I can explain to it is, you remember the old slide decks and you pull out the slides and and you project them? That's what it feels like. You go into the back of your memory and you're remembering things from, like, when you were 3 and when you were 2 and things that you hadn't touched on. That was the first time. And the colours are so much more vivid and the sounds are much more intense. And then the next time and the next time and the next time, and that's how you deal with the trauma. Anyway, and it was all guided with my hypnotherapist. Anyway, The next time, the 5 milligram hero dose, you just go different planets. And when I say different planets, like, you know when people say you time travel? That's what it was. And this next bit is going to sound like I'm nuts. I know this. But if you've done it, you'll know what I'm talking about.
The trolls and haters are currently salivating on their keyboards, looking forward to what's about to come out of your mouth.
If you've ever listened to a Joe Rogan episode, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, true.
But you time travel, and there's this thing called psychonauts, right, where some people are more susceptible to it than others. Like, you know, some people have different experiences. Anyway, I went so far. I was in different realms. I was in different, like, when I say planets, like, the problem is you're seeing things, right? You're hallucinating, but there's nothing that tells you you're in the human dimension. Like, I don't see trees. Yeah. There's no people.
There's nothing anchoring you back.
Yeah,
here.
so everything I'm seeing is completely alien to me.
Yeah.
And what's weird, and this is why, like, you know, people have bad trips, because you metabolize it and you come out of the trip and then you go back in it again. And so I came out, and when I opened my eyes, I couldn't see the human realm, and I freaked out. Bad trip. But anyway, so I did all that, and that was a wild experience. And then I came out, I was like, that. I was quite terrified, literally quite terrified. And that's what they say about unpacking the trauma. Like, it was starting to come out. Anyway, dealt with that. And so I had to do one more journey. And then this time, obviously, I'd sort of pushed out all that bad stuff. Went back into the trip, and you do what they call regression. So you go through your life cycle. So not just your life. You go through, how do I explain this? I'm sure someone can do this better than me. Every atom, every carbon atom in your body has lived a life prior to you. Right? We are stardust, as they say.
Well, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change its form.
And so maybe you were a tree. Maybe when they say you,
the atoms that are inside you. Yeah.
And so they're the past. This is the only way I can explain it to myself, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And that's the problem with it. Like, you're trying to use human words to identify something that's not human. Anyway, so you go through your past lives. So I was an owl at one point. I was a snake. I was water. And you go through all those past lives. And then you keep going back and back and back and back. And the furthest back I was, and this is why I say I was Anubis. So in this trip, I was standing in an Egyptian temple. I don't know which one, but I was there. It is so real to me. I could feel the subtle draft coming through. I could see and feel the flickering of the lanterns on the wall. And my job as Anubis, he weighed the hearts of individuals to decide whether or not they qualified for the afterlife. And if the heart was heavier than the feather...
After they were cut out whilst they were standing in front of you or something?
As they're being mummified.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right.
So they have to die first.
I'm not an Egyptian, mummification expert.
So you would have heard of the Book of the Dead?
I've heard of, yes.
This is literally the story of the Book of the Dead.
Okay.
And so essentially the pharaoh, for example, dies, and then they're mummified. They pull out all the organs into the canopic jars, and then the heart gets weighed. Now, if you lived an immoral life, if you sinned, your heart would be heavier than the feather of purity, and therefore your soul would be banished. Like, there's no art, because they believed in reincarnation. There's no reincarnation for you. You're done. Your soul gets literally thrown in the bin. And this trip that I was in, it was so, when I say it was so realistic, like, it was like I was there last week. I can play it for you word for word. And in front of me, so I was in this altar, I was Anubis, and Anubis has the head of a dog, right? And so I'm weighing the hearts, and I was talking to what I can only describe as Ra, which is God. Ra is the sun god, right? That's the highest god. And I was having a hard time weighing these souls, because I could see in front of me, you know, Dante's levels of hell? It looked like that.
Okay.
And I could see the levels of hell was like this big open pit, and you could see as it descended down and got darker and darker. Imagine like the Mariana Trench, less light gets to the bottom. And it was my job to decide which souls went up to heaven or into the afterlife and which ones had to go in there. And it was a really hard thing. Anyway, that trip was it was like it happened yesterday. That's how weird it was. And I came out of the trip and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, because it was so real, I was like, I need to figure this out. Like, how does this happen? And, you know, depending what literature you read on this, they'll say that's a life that you've lived. Like, not Carly, but my atoms
there's an
or
atom
whatever.
in your body.
Like, I have lived that life before.
So I've got a question for you, though.
No one thought this was going here, did they?
How did you know you came out of that trip?
Well,
What if this is part of it?
You know what?
I mean, it's pretty trippy to think that you get to do a podcast with Topher Field.
It's pretty trippy to think I was this good looking in this realm. No, but the crazy thing is, when people talk about it being a simulation, it is really bizarre. And, like, I'm not interested in drugs for the sense of, like, what do you call it? Like, recreational
Party
fun.
drugs and whatever, yeah.
I am so interested in what okay, so this is the way I'd explain it. You know, you talk about how like music is architecture and so forth, and I can hear sound. There are so many things that exist in this world that us as humans can't perceive because we think we only have 5 senses.
Yep.
There is literature that would argue we have more senses than that, but we don't tap into them.
Yep.
Our intuition's a big one, gut intuition, instincts and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the modern world, is deliberately tried to dull those down. Now I'm sounding like...
Don't about deliberately, I think it's just a consequence, but yeah.
I'm sounding like a conspiracy theorist now.
Yeah.
But
starting to sound like an old grandma, actually. Back in my day.
But it's one of those things, right? You said before about we can only see certain wavelengths of light. And you're right. We can't see infrared. We can't see so many different light. We see just this little tiny prism.
Yep.
And so what psilocybin can do is open you up to things that your mind can't see because I don't know whether the human side of us is like, no, that seems too ridiculous.
So let me switch gears a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I'm not gonna say you're wrong because I can't. Neither
you're
of us
dealing
can
with a
prove
mental patient right now.
So this is the last episode of the Carlz and Topher podcast. Next week it'll be the Topher podcast. No, so from my perspective, I look at it and say, well, God's the creator of the entire universe, and he creates with purpose. Now, some things have mutated since he created them, but he created everything with purpose. So even, the discoveries we're making, even around things like snake venom being useful for treating cancers and things like that, I'm convinced that he created everything from cannabis to psychoactive mushrooms, etc., as medicine.
I agree.
And actually, we use a lot of it as medicine, but exactly what you said before about the pharmaceutical companies, they synthesize so they can patent. And they say, oh, no, this isn't that thing. Yeah. This is,
That's too dangerous and unregulated.
So tramadol and these things, these are opioids.
Yeah.
Right, this is a synthesization of opium, or in some cases, it's actually just they take real opium and they remanufacture it.
It's like what they've done with fentanyl that can kill you.
Yeah, correct. And so I'm like you. I've never had any weed. Literally, you're looking at my hard drugs right now. That's nicotine and caffeine and alcohol. That's the nastiest stuff I've ever had in my life. But and I used to be 100%. Pro-drug war, anti-drugs, lock them all up, throw them in prison. I used to, when I was a teenager, I was like, well, why don't they just increase the minimum age for buying cigarettes by 1 year every year? And then no one new will ever take up cigarettes because I was an idiot when I was at that age. And so that's where I was. And then I came around and just had a complete revelation that we're doing so much harm with the war on drugs. And most of these drugs that we demonize, yes, they can be misused, but so can sugar and donuts and alcohol and other things that we don't really care too much about. There are people who destroy their lives by being a workaholic. Destroy all their relationships, destroy their health.
It's not the thing; it's the person at the end of the day. Like they're the one that choose, and obviously there's like circumstances that might lead them to that.
Yeah.
But banning things isn't the answer. I don't believe that to be true at all.
As I'm heading into my own journey of dealing with some of the PTSD that I got during COVID and recognising that I've taken a lot more damage along the way than I've sort of realised along the way, there is a place for these substances, and I think God intended it to be that way.
Yeah. And again, and I'm not saying this to sound pure or anything like that. It never appealed to me, drug culture, never. Yep. And I used to see people who would do MDMA or is that ecstasy? It's the same thing, right?
I think so, yeah.
Similar. Yeah. Anyway, all my friends did it and that's fine. And I never judged them in the sense that I just wasn't there. And everyone would know, don't bring drugs if Carlz is there.
Oh, I'd go out with my friends and they'd do all kinds of things. And I'd literally, they'd have the blunt and I'd take the blunt and pass it to the next person on the other side of me. Whatever.
Just never interested me. And I genuinely don't like the taste of alcohol. I don't not drink for any reason than I...
You can take it intravenously. It just avoids the whole taste thing,
Well, this is the thing. Everyone's like, oh, you like this. It tastes good. I don't like the burn. I genuinely don't like it.
So I didn't start drinking beer till I was into my 30s because when I was in the army, everyone's like, oh, if you just drink enough of it, you'll start to like it. I'm like, yeah, but right next to the beers in the same in the same fridge is Coke, and I already like that. So, and it costs less. So I'll spend less money on a drink I already like. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I really began to drink any type of alcohol on a regular basis. So I'm similar to you.
I try it, and I'm just like for example, wine. I like the idea of sommeliers. Is it sommeliers or sommeliers? And how they can taste all these notes and stuff. And I'm like, that sounds so interesting. And then I try it. I'm like, this tastes like dirt, man. And what are you talking about? Like taste of oak and bouquets of blueberries.
So the one thing I'm fairly sure of right now is that nothing we've discussed
None
is
at all.
on your notes.
Nah.
So we might want to get started.
I think it's interesting though. Someone did leave a comment last week that was like, it's all the tangent chats we have that are most enjoyable.
Yeah, you tell us. Do you reckon the content is better or the rabbit holes are better? When we're on our plan or when we're off our plan, which part of this podcast is better?
And also, if you are genuinely interested around the psilocybin chat, there are a couple of people I would love to have.
Honestly, let's make room. And G's going to have to buy a third microphone.
What's Simon's people?
We'll stick it in the middle so all the microphones are in their face and they have to sit behind them, and then they can be our guest.
All right, so I have to talk about the hypocrisy of the climate stuff, and I always do this like a bit facetiously because there is a very serious element to this. But can we talk about Mike Cannon-Brookes and his private jet?
Don't pick on poor Mikey. He needs to be able to travel faster so he can spend more time with his kids.
He needs to be a better dad. What says that you're a better dad than having a 19-seater private jet?
I think, again, I'm just going to put his hat on, okay? Leaving a burning planet is less bad, makes you a less bad dad than taking longer to get home.
Correct. I can't think of anything more gargantuanly destructive to the world than not having a private jet to get back to your children a bit quicker.
What I adore about this is he talks about the internal conflict and how torn up he was. But also is very quick to point out, he can buy carbon offsets, he can buy things to they plant some trees on the other side of the planet, and that makes up for the fact that you just spewed a couple of dead dinosaurs out the back of your private jet. That's all well and good. But if he actually thought that the apocalypse was coming, he could buy those carbon offsets and not burn the dinosaurs. He could take all the money he just spent on the plane and plant trees with it, with all of that money.
My favourite thing about the private jet too, obviously there's different models of private jet. There's private jets and we have pissing contests over cameras or cars. Billionaires have pissing contests over their yachts, their jets. Oh, yeah. It's a 19-seater. That is a significantly big plane to be flying. And he obviously flew it from Sydney to Melbourne to be a better dad so he could go to the Grand Prix to watch the Williams racing team, of which he's a major sponsor.
Because, of course, I love this. I love Formula One bang on about how the fuel they use is sustainable. I'm reasonably sure that the carbon footprint of Formula One is not exclusively made up of the fuel burned by the Formula One cars on the track during the race. I think there just might be a little bit of other energy consumption in the form of flying truckloads of gear around the world to get to 26 different races, all of the lights, all of the hospitality, the fridges that keep the champagne cold for all of their high net worth corporate guests.
Correct.
Would use more energy than their cars do out on the track. But no. But we spend money to plant trees.
So I had to Google this because I wanted to see what he bought. So how much do you think his jet was?
I actually don't know. I haven't looked it up. Help me out. Was it secondhand or new?
Ooh, hang on. Was it new or secondhand?
It matters.
It does matter.
I'm just going to reach back into my previous life.
How embarrassing to have a second-hand yacht. What kind of potter would buy that?
Jet, you mean? We're talking about the jet. So 19-seater, a jet, not a prop.
It was purchased new.
Purchased new. Okay. I don't think he would have gone completely outrageously lavish. I'm going to say it was 25 million.
US or AUD?
I was thinking AUD, but...
Oh, well, you would be wrong. And I would need you to triple that.
Oh.
He bought a Bombardier Global 7500 and it cost 75 million USD, which equates to approximately 116 AUD. He bought it brand new from Bombardier themselves.
Mr. Cannon-Brookes, you are a hypocrite and a wastrel. I would like to say for the record that I have never spent more than 25 million on a private jet.
This is the thing, right? This is why I love Adrian Portelli, right? Local Keeler boy, Westie, grew up with fuck all, excuse me, I'm swearing.
Made his money and loves it.
Made his money and spends it and enjoys it.
Yeah.
Good on you, Adrian.
Yeah.
I love it.
I wouldn't necessarily want to have to hang out with him. He seems like a bit of a douche, but I do not begrudge him.
Because he's young? Because he's quite young.
But so I was a terrible douche when I was a kid, and many people watching are like, yeah, when you were a kid? Mm-hmm. So I just wouldn't be able to handle him largely because he would feel very familiar to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, people mature at different ages, but, to be honest, if I was a billionaire at his age and I was going and buying all these supercars, God, I'd have fun.
Yes, but I would also have been just one of the worst human beings imaginable.
Yeah.
I would be like, I get why young stars go shipwreck. I get it. Like
There is a real sense. Here's the thing, right? Like on the car thing, I have dreamt of a Ferrari my entire life. That is my absolute number one goal in life. I just want to own a Ferrari. I've never specified what model. I'd like the F40, but let's be honest, it's not going to happen. But, it's one of those things.
That's a tall order, yep.
Yeah. It's not so much, because it's an expensive car. It's the fact that it's like something I've thought about since I was 3, and then that materialising. And I used to say, I'll have it by my 30th birthday. And then I was like, I'll have it by my 40th birthday. There's something I've realised as I get older. That delayed gratification makes it so much more worthwhile because there's a story behind it. And if I'm really honest, the journey is far more enjoyable. I think if I got that outcome too early, I probably would have been like an absolutely obnoxious, annoying person and maybe would have self-destructed. I don't know. Hard to say.
It is hard to say. But one of the things that I've certainly changed on is I used to look at, an old person getting a dream car, Bentley or a Ferrari or a Porsche or whatever it may be. And I would look at them and go, oh, what a shame that they didn't get it till they were that old.
Yeah.
But now, of course, I realise you as a human being, you don't feel old when you're old.
No, you don't,
right?
do you?
And I 16-year-old me looking at 42-year-old me would have been like, oh, you decrepit old man. I feel exactly the same.
Yeah.
On the inside, I feel exactly the
nothing's
same.
Changed, yeah.
And so, okay, what if it takes me till I'm 80 to buy and build the car that I've talked about where I want to build it, right? What if it takes me till I'm 80? Am I going to enjoy the build less? No. Yeah. Am I going to enjoy that first time I get in it and fire it up less? Yeah. No. I will get just as much value out of that, out of that whole experience.
Well, I'm hijacking the conversation, but this has got something to do with culture because I obviously, with my master's at the moment, I'm looking in some really obtuse places for information about what I'm looking at. And a lot of what I'm studying is hyperconsumption. And we've only ramped that up. And a lot of people blame capitalism, like capitalism's the fault. And I'm like, yes and no. It's the accessibility and the inability for us to be able to delay that gratification as well. Yep. We are a self-fulfilling prophecy there. And I want to give you an example from one of our favourite people, Miss Bonnie Blue.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought her up.
I've been you'd missed
chomping at the bit.
I need to ask what she bought. So she's bought herself a Ferrari.
Oh, yes.
And which Ferrari?
Wasn't she the one that was crying about how she had to do whatever video it was in order to give money away to some people?
Oh, yes, who were trying to get
Wasn't
IVF.
that her?
Yeah. These people are just morally
But then she
bankrupt.
had money on the side for a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So she bought a 458.
Okay.
And she's put it all over social media. And
I mean, that's just sort of a consumer grade Ferrari. It's not one of the special ones, but
it's
it's
completely
nice
customized. So about 490,000 USD. And look, to this, I sort of looked at it and I was like, yeah, God, Carly, all you have to do is just take your clothes off and root 1,000 men on camera. To me... I
would probably make even more money if I did that.
Do you know what? There is a niche for everyone.
There is a niche for everything. I would make a small fortune.
Yeah, I
small
don't
being the
doubt
operative
that,
word.
actually, but please don't. I never, ever need to see that.
My apologies for that brain bleach. Yeah.
Yeah. It just sounded like... short-circuiting. But yeah, so my point is with this, right, and I've seen this as well with another influencer that I actually really used to love and then went off for a while. Her name was Lydia Millen. She was a fashion influencer. Run with me. This is important. So, again...
I'll take your word for it.
Started from nothing. That normal trajectory of just, like, worked really hard, built... And she's like an OG influencer, right? Like... Prior to YouTube and Instagram being what it is today, she rode that way. She was a blogger and then started doing YouTube vlogs and whatever. And she's done very well for herself. She's I don't know what she's worth, quite obviously a few million. And she went from this phase of finding her style and it's fun. You're on that journey with her. And then, of course, it inevitably ended up with her buying Hermes Birkins, right? Do you know much about Hermes?
Look, only that they are one of those brands that when people wear it, they want you to know that they're wearing it.
Well, it's just a statement. It's like, it's basically like, hey, here's my $40,000 handbag that you can't afford, but I can. And so the thing with Hermes is they treat you like absolute trash and you have to spend a huge amount of money to even qualify for the bag. You can't just go in there and buy it. So you got to play this game, right? And so some people like to be...
But Ferrari do the same thing.
Oh, of course they do.
You can't get their high-end limited run cars unless
you have to be offered it.
7 or 8 of their consumer,
correct,
bottom end.
And you can't sell them. You don't have to still own them.
If you get known for flipping their cars, you're blacklisted instantly.
Yeah. Like Adrian Portelli put up on his stories the other day, like he wants the F80. I'm like, mate, you got no chance unless you buy it secondhand. Like they've already been allocated.
I also think they're hideous, by the way. I think
awful.
Ferrari's gone way downhill with their latest design language.
V6,
sorry, but
like,
it sounds horrible. It's like when Formula One abandoned the V8s.
Yeah.
Right. They went from V12s to V10s, and I could forgive them because a V10 has a unique kind of scream. It's a sound you won't hear anywhere else. Then they went to the V8s, and I went, I don't love it, but okay, they're still loud. They rev high. It's still different to any road car. Then they went to these hybrid V6s, and it sounds like the Tin Woodsman with indigestion. It's just, it's just, no.
But I mean,
that's Ferrari now.
Yeah, we discussed this last week. The V8's making a comeback. G has promised to put me a supercharged Hemi V8 in my car. Because I already don't burn enough petrol.
Just look out for trees.
Trees.
Yeah. So you know, the US Army put, I believe it was a Lamborghini V12 into a Hummer.
Yeah.
I think it was called the H1. I think the original H1, not that they commercialized it later, a completely different thing. As an experiment to see what would a super high speed Hummer do for the American military in open terrain desert type situations. What it does is it gets lots of test drivers killed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Even like experienced military test drivers, they're just doing end over end flips in these things because they just get air off, whatever. Yeah. So it sounds fun, but just
be smart.
Just look out for trees.
On that, there's a guy, there's a YouTuber who I'm obsessed with at the moment. His name's Matt Armstrong. He basically buys like damaged supercars. He just bought a Lamborghini Revolto, which had like a few kilometers on the clock, and he's basically rebuilding it because same thing. Like they've got too much power.
Written themselves off.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, we're off the topic, but back to this whole luxury trend.
F80. That's where you just were.
Yeah, no, we're going back to the Birkin thing.
Okay, all right. So Birkins. All right.
What I'm saying is like there's this obvious trajectory where people think success looks like this. It looks like F80s, private yachts, private jets, Ferraris, whatever, right? They think this. And so I used to think this too, and I used to be on this trajectory to get there. And then what you realise is to maintain that lifestyle, like you can't just have a private jet. You've got to have somewhere to hang it. You've got to have all the staff. You've got to have a pilot. Like it becomes a lot more cumbersome. Maintenance.
And these aren't things that you can just leave to sit for a year and come back to it and it's exactly the same. They have to be maintained. There's a schedule that must be honoured regardless of whether you do any hours in them.
Yeah. And there's so much things to aviation, right? There's so many loopholes you have to jump through. Same with supercars. Supercars break all the time.
So the ultimate for me, it will never be beaten. The McLaren F1. That is the daddy of all of the supercars. Gordon Murray design. To own one of those will cost you, I think it's in the order of $40,000 a year just in servicing.
Yeah.
If there's no major services that year, regardless of whether you switch it on.
Yeah.
And then every 5 or 7 years or something, the fuel tank has to come out, and that's like ship the car back to England.
Yeah.
Get the job done, ship it back again.
It's
Stupid
like
amounts of money
like
just to have it sitting there.
The road legal McLarens, like their gearbox dies, and it's like, oh, sorry, $75,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what poor people, when I say poor, I mean us punters, what we don't realise is that like those assets, you don't just buy it and you own it. The cost of having them is gargantuan, right? Mm-hmm. And so we see this trajectory and we think, oh, we've got to get there. Birkin bags and all this sort of stuff. So Lydia Millen is one of those people and she's just playing it out in real time. And she's got there. And now she came out the other day, she put a video up and she was like, the only time she can wear those bags is when she goes to London because she lives in the countryside in the UK. Makes no sense to be walking around with your pigs in a Birkin. But the problem is when she's in London, she feels so unsafe. She's terrified of being robbed and having her arm cut off that she turns the bag around and then she won't walk around with it. And she's like, I don't want them in my house because people will find out where I live and they'll try and get them from the house. So they're in a vault. So she's like, I've got these assets that I can't even touch.
Your things own you.
And she's like, what's the point? And so she put this video out and trolls are going to troll, whatever. And I was reading the comments and very few people realise that that's not actually a success. When you become like a victim of your success, that you can't actually go outside, you can't just go to the supermarket as normal, you can't just live a normal life. Like that becomes
it's like you when you become the world's most famous podcaster. Yeah. You won't be able to go into the supermarket because everyone's going to want your autograph and just, it just...
I love going to Woolies. Yeah. Leave me alone. I want to look at the back of the labels.
Well, sorry, but, once you're world famous, Carly...
Yeah, well, but this is the sacrifice, right? So it's like you want the success, but you don't realise that there's always a pitfall.
There's always a cost. There's always a cost.
And I just thought it was really interesting. So when you talk about like Mike Cannon-Brookes, right? Like he was just a regular Joe. They've done really well for themselves. Atlassian, made billions. Great. But now obviously he's a billionaire. What do billionaires need? They need a jet.
Yeah. So and the hypocrisy that comes in with that. Can I just say before we come back to the hypocrisy, can I make one last point on this things issue? I do not know a single person with a genuinely happy, close family that would be willing to trade that family for a jet and a yacht and a mansion. But I know a lot of people with jets, yachts and mansions who would trade them in a heartbeat to have a happy family.
Can I tell you a story very quickly? Promise, guys, this podcast will get going in a second. It's all part of it. Gareth has a client. Oh, he's got a couple of clients who have a lot of money because he's in motorsport, right? And there's this one particular client that we've spent some time with, and this person has everything. They've got the plane, they've got the cars, they've got the cash, right? Very, very successful person. I've never met a more miserable, bitter person in my life. Like, nice enough, don't get me wrong, like, we'll go for dinner or whatever, like, pleasant conversations,
not an
like
asshole.
that. But just, like, it's like there's, you know, in the cartoons, there's a little storm cloud that's, like, raining. That's what they're like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, G and I sitting there going, it's nice, we're having a great time. And he's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, come on.
But this is the thing. Your human appetites scale with your opportunities. Human nature is to always want the thing that's just out of your reach.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at any Ferrari. I'd love a Ferrari. Then you get that Ferrari and you're like, oh, I always really did want that F40. And then let's say you get an F40 and you're like, yeah, but it's not the color I want.
I want the yellow one,
et cetera, right? And so the human heart is deceitful. It deceives you. It says you'll be happy if you can get to this point. And then you get to that point and it goes, oh, actually, you'll be happy if you get to that one.
Yeah.
And this is why so many rock stars and famous people end up actually offing themselves is because they lie to themselves about, oh, I'll be happy if. And if you never achieve those things, then you can live in that lie. You can continue to lie to yourself. Once you have those things, the lie crumbles. And they go, well, maybe I never will be.
Yeah.
And that's where they go down the drain.
What I also found really interesting in my research is talking about, it's such a curveball, but it makes so much sense. People who get given a death sentence, like a terminal illness or something, and they know that inevitability is a lot closer than they were hoping. So, you know, they might be like 40 years old and they've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. They're being given 6 months to live. Watch how freely they live their life.
Yep.
Not all, but most.
Yeah, so many.
They don't worry about being judged anymore. They don't care. They don't worry about, like, you know, having to save for a rainy day. They don't care. Like, it's like the shackles are off, right?
There's another interesting study around that, which looked at people who suffered permanent debilitating injuries, you know, car crash, serious injury kind of stuff, losing limbs, losing, you know, spinal cord damage, you know, strokes, these sorts of things. And they measured people's happiness levels, and they also had a placebo, not a placebo group, a control group of people who nothing happened to them. And what they found was that people's baseline happiness varies massively. Some people are just baseline miserable, some people are baseline happy, and their circumstances really don't affect that. And then when people have a terrible thing happen to them, their level of happiness drops, and then within 12 months has returned to baseline. They still can't walk. They still have whatever it is. It's permanent. Yeah. But within 12 months, their level of happiness has returned to their baseline.
I've started to realise now, and this is sort of around, like, I write, like, a lot of essays on X now, and I actually really enjoy writing because it helps me think, and it, you know, I'm doing all this research over here, and it's nice to channel it somewhere. And what I've realised as well, like, you know, progressive leftists want all the shackles off. You know, we can be anything, you can do anything, like, without judgment, without shame and all this sort of stuff. Those boundaries actually make for a much more happy, pleasant experience because you're not, like, bouncing off. You know where you're going, if that makes sense.
So you can what is it? You can ignore the rules, but you can't ignore, or you can ignore how life works, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring how life works. That's the difference between a libertine and a libertarian. A libertine says, I should be able to do whatever I want without consequences. A libertarian says, you have the right to do whatever you want, but the consequences are yours. Right? And that is philosophically and in practice, that is a massive difference. That is a world of difference.
Yeah.
Consequences are literally an inherent natural part of the way the universe works. You cannot live without consequence. You don't get to choose to have consequences or not. You only get to choose what the consequences are, and you do that by choosing what actions you take. So when we actually allow people to live in a way that defies the consequences and says, oh, well, you know, you can't judge me like that. Well, no. You can make whatever decisions you want, and then I'm allowed to make whatever decisions I want in response to the decisions that you've made. And that can include ostracizing you, not doing business with you, no longer working for you, no longer having you work for me. That is fuck around, find out. That is the consequences of your actions.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I just think it's really interesting. And you're seeing a lot of that now because I think Yeah, a lot of people are selling off stuff. A lot of people are downsizing because you realise you actually don't need as much stuff that we've been led to believe.
It just makes life so complicated.
Yeah. So, Mike Cannon-Brookes, you might find that jet doesn't make you that happy.
Look, it won't make him happy. I have no issue. Honestly, I have no issue with someone having a jet so they can get around faster and spend more time with the family. To the eyes of people 80 or 100 years ago, families having 2 cars because sometimes the other half needs a car whilst the one half also has a car would have seemed like an unacceptable extravagance. How could you possibly justify living in such a lavish way? The early cars were an extreme extravagance. The very idea of having a car, like why can't you just live close enough that you can walk to your local shops? So we take for granted all of the extravagances that we've already got. And again, we calibrate for that and then we get jealous of the ones who are just out of our reach. I refuse to play that game. So you know what, Mike Cannon-Brookes, enjoy your plane. I genuinely, I hope you do. But don't think that we haven't noticed the hypocrisy, and don't think that telling us how much it's torn you up on the inside and the fact that you're buying carbon offsets somehow takes away the extreme hypocrisy that we are all looking at right now.
This is literally the emperor's new clothes. That's what it is. But that brings me to the next thing that you shared last week, which was that they are now clearing out parts of the Amazon rainforest for a 4-lane highway.
I love this. I love this so much. So I read a lot, so do you, okay? And you know, sometimes you read something and it sticks with you.
Yeah.
There is a book that I read, it's got to be 14 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that now, called Science and Public Policy, The Virtuous Corruption of Virtual Environmental Science. Sounds incredibly boring. I found it fascinating. It was a page turner for me. And it was a University of Tasmania professor, Ainsley Kello, and he goes into how the environmental movement basically fabricates their numbers using corrupted data and corrupted models that are based on virtuous corruption. That is, you're lying, but you're lying to save the world, so it's virtuous. You're being corrupt, but no, I'm not the bad guy. I'm virtuous here because I'm saving the world, and they use models to do that. Well, the way, you know, you've heard these claims, 100,000 species go extinct every year, 150 species a day are going extinct. Well, if you actually look at the list, the database of species that are listed as extinct, the number going extinct every year can be counted on one hand. So where do they get that number from? If the actual list is 5 or less in a year, and yet they're saying 150 a day, well, they get it from these models. And what they did, there was a study that had a look at the size of habitat and the biodiversity and how much biodiversity there was and how that changes with size. So your median strip on the street, the grass out there is going to have much less biodiversity than a backyard, which will have less biodiversity than a golf course, which will have less biodiversity than a rainforest, okay? The diversity, not just the number of animals, but the diversity of those animals increases with size. And so what they said was, well, if that's true, then if we cut a habitat in half, then we're not just going to have 2 habitats that have the same biodiversity as before. Actually, each of them, because they're only half the size now, is going to lose a bunch of species. So then they said, well, what defines it as having been cut in half? And they decided basically that if a human passes through it, it has been bisected. So if you have a fire trail, for not like a fire break, but a trail for firefighting vehicles or 4-wheel drives to come through, and a couple of 4-wheel drives go through every week, that no longer functions as a single habitat. That's now 2 separate habitats. And this is where these numbers come from, where they go, well, we're building new roads and pathways and power lines and all kinds of things through habitat. All this is habitat destruction. Yeah. And it's not just the acreage of where you put the road, it's the fact that it cut that habitat in half and now you've just killed hundreds of species. That's where these numbers come from. So then they shove that down our throats for decades and raise money off the back of it. Oh, we need your money because 150 species are going extinct every single day. And then they have the gall to turn around and build a 13-kilometre road straight through the middle of protected Amazon jungle, not for any old purpose, but because the roads that existed going into the city where this climate conference was going to be held wouldn't be able to carry all 65,000 delegates.
65,000 people is obscene.
So they need a road through protected Amazon jungle so that they can have a global conference that people will fly to from all over the world, all about how to save the environment.
Why not just have the conference in, I don't know, London, New York?
And according to their own numbers, by cutting that Amazonian habitat in half, they've just killed hundreds of species.
But not only that, like the vast amount of travel that's required. Most of these people are coming from Europe.
So the climate cult is a religion.
Oh.
It is an article of faith, and it does come back to virtuous corruption. Are we good? We're recording the audio?
Yeah,
All right. You're just playing with your toys.
Making sure.
Playing
Actually,
with it.
It has sounds. Did you know this? Like I could do something. Hang on. I was looking for the...
Oh, really?
I think it's... Which one would it be? Maybe that one? Wah, wah, wah. We're not gonna hear
You
it.
did that. That wasn't the thing. That was you.
No, it's playing, but we
is
can't
it?
hear it
Oh,
because
okay.
it's recording. But then there's also...
Wow, so you
applause.
got to hear that and we didn't. There you go.
It's currently applauding me. Thank you. You're
Oh,
welcome.
yeah. Well
But
done.
soon,
Well done.
how do you feel about wearing over-ear head?
Can I put him into noise cancelling mode so I don't have to listen to you?
No.
Oh.
You will hear me even better. You'll hear me in 3D.
That's a terrible idea.
But yeah,
No, I'm fine. That's fine. Yeah.
I think that's the next step. But anyway, the hypocrisy. That's just
It's
the
extraordinary.
left, isn't it?
But it's the whole thing, and it's the thing is that what they actually want is not to save the world. What they want is to be and to feel superior. They want to believe that they are better than the rest. And on that basis, this is where virtuous corruption comes from. Because I'm saving the world, I can allow myself to do things that I would never let you do. You can't have a private jet, but I can. It's not hypocrisy. I'm the one doing all the work to save the world.
Yeah.
Without me, the world is never going to get saved. I need the private jet to do all my very important work to save the world.
It's narcissism. You're centering
It is.
yourself in the middle of a hypothetical crisis, which brings me to, I think we talked about this last week, or maybe I talked about it on my ex, how the progressives would rather argue about hypotheticals than face reality. So they'll sit there and talk about things in the ether over here that haven't actually come to fruition, whilst ignoring literally the world burning over here.
I'll ride with you movement.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yep, sorry.
Yeah. 100%. And I noticed it, I think I said this the other day about the community group chat where they're so fixated on this hypothetical grandchild.
Carly, you didn't lose your temper on X about this last week, did you?
Maybe.
Just a little bit?
bit.
Just maybe.
I went off. I went off. Do you know what's funny is my online persona seems far more vicious than I am.
You are savage, and I love it, by the way. It's fantastic.
It's my alter ego. It's Spicy Carlz.
Yeah, Spicy Carlz. Spicy Carlz is spicy. So tell us this story because you... I'm going to abbreviate because I think last week we talked about the fact that you got kicked out of your chat. You got kicked out because you were saying to them, why are we worrying about a 30 kilometre versus 50 kilometre an hour speed limit when the people speeding through our estate are not from the estate, they're in stolen cars and they're going to drive at whatever speed they want. That is what got you kicked out.
Yeah, that was essentially it.
And then what happened this week?
I was told that I was politicising it. I was like, how is it not political? We have had the same government for almost 2 decades. This is a direct result of the government. Like, this is my whole thing. I'm like, you can argue that it's not political, but the reality is... Anyway, so they were more concerned about residents, so people who live here driving too fast.
And they were saying a hypothetical grandchild that's out playing on the street when someone
might be in
comes...
hospital for 4 weeks.
Which is a very specific thing, wasn't it?
Very
In hospital specifically for 4 weeks because a resident was travelling at was exceeding a 50 kilometre an hour speed limit, but would presumably obey a 30 kilometre an hour speed limit.
If they're not currently obeying the 50, they'll surely obey the 30. That was the argument.
Because that's how psychology works. And you were saying the problem is actually people stealing cars and speeding through our estate at reckless speeds. And then what happened this week?
I was just like, I'm failing to understand how this is not computing in their heads. But this week, I'm no longer in the community group, but it was brought to my attention that there was a stolen Audi that we didn't know at the time, but it was an Audi speeding full of teenagers. And would you believe the group was sitting there going, oh, whose children are speeding in their car? Like, oh, they look quite young. And they're not displaying any P plates. And, like, it was this big kerfuffle. Like, do you remember Harold from Neighbours?
I'm proud to say I've never seen a full episode, but yes, I know the character.
Yeah, I was just like, I haven't either, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know the character, yes.
And so they're all carrying on, and I
Sorry, they're all carrying on?
Carrying on, yes, exactly. And then one guy's like, oh, I'm going to call the police. And then I write, this is on the Facebook version, and I was like, it's probably teenagers with a stolen car, because there's a Facebook group and then there's a Telegram group, which I'm not about. Anyway, that gets screenshot. And then this guy's like, oh, I've called the Chelsea police. It's a stolen car. They're trying to find them. They're hiding in these states. So if you see them, please tell them in. And I'm sitting there going, it's almost as if the thing you told me wouldn't happen is literally happening.
Just a little bit. Now they, of course, came back to you and said, we're so sorry for judging you, Carlz. Please come back to the Telegram group. In fact, we're going to make you the leader of the Telegram group because clearly you have more foresight than us. And they definitely wouldn't have kicked you out of the Facebook group. No,
instead they were fixated on the fact that we definitely need to put those speed limit signs back up and make sure everyone knows what the speed limit is. Because criminals care. Which brings me to the next thing. We have to get to this point. We need to talk about Jacinta Allen and the Machete thing. Can I just go off?
Hey, I've never stopped you before.
No, okay. So you guys
just get comfy, guys. I'm gonna.
You guys have seen it. I feel like I don't need to tell you what's happened. But anyway, the heat was so extraordinary that Jacinta Allen had to go on the Fifi Box show, like whatever, the breakfast show, right? Because they had so many signatures on the thing. It was such a hot topic. She's obviously gone on there to save face. And to her weird credit, she did apologise. Not that it means
She actually did, because we were talking about, because that happened while we were recording last week, and we were saying, they'll never apologise, and I was agreeing with you, because it's very rare that they do. And credit where it's due,
Maybe she listened to me.
A sliver of credit in a very big pile of dog shit. She did actually say that she got it wrong.
They were her words. We got it wrong. And now they were like, we're immediately with this, strongest bail laws in the country, yada, yada, yada. And like, again, to the normies, again, not to be disparaging, but to the normies, they assume that's going to happen tomorrow. Like the law change, boom, off you go. No, it's got to be tabled in Parliament. It's got to be debated. It's got to be passed, all the things. Like that's the whole point of a democracy. Anyway, so this week was sitting week. They've haphazardly put this bill together, but they didn't show anyone else the bill until the day. So what you're essentially asking is people to vote on something they haven't read. Now, why are you guys going to be like, well, we agree with it. Why would we worry about it? Well, because they can slip other things into that bill.
And details matter. You can say on the bill, this is the best bail law bill in the history, but if it doesn't actually work that way, if what the bill does isn't the best bail law bill in history.
Oversight is how we have democracy. Like you need people to be able to read the bill.
Also, this is one of those moments where it's really important for politicians to be grown-ups. And work across the aisle with each other. And so what should have happened here was as the drafts were being developed, they should have been going to the Liberal Party and saying, hey, we want to get this through real quick. We don't want to have debates in Parliament. Can you please have a look and raise any concerns you have with us now so that we can guillotine debate and get this thing through? They didn't do that. In fact, my understanding is, and I'm not fully across this, so I don't take this as absolute gospel, but my understanding is that they did try and sit down for one briefing with the Victorian opposition, which is the Liberal Party, and the Liberal Party ended up walking out because it was such a shambles of a briefing.
And it got given to them like at the last minute and, there's no time. And so it's now come out that those bail reforms probably won't happen until the end of the year, which, given that we're in March, that is not a good look. How many more people are going to be robbed, assaulted, sexually assaulted, potentially killed?
At the current rate, there should only be another probably 5 to 8 fatalities at the current rate.
Well, interestingly, so that she came on the radio when we did the podcast on Thursday, and then I believe it was Friday night, someone was murdered with a machete, no less, about 25 minutes from here. And the details were murky. They've since come out, but, literally, as you said, you're going to do a ban on machetes. Someone gets murdered by a machete. Now, you and I both agree on this. The machete's not the problem. It's the kid wielding it. Like, banning the machete means absolutely stuff all. It hasn't stopped people getting guns. Hasn't stopped people from stealing cars. Lots of things have been banned for a very long time, and it doesn't stop people doing them.
Doesn't stop people. I have a decent-sized meat cleaver, one of those square kind of meat cleaver things, literally for breaking apart carcasses.
For cutting bones.
Well, for getting through the joints and stuff. That is far more terrifying than the machete that I have for camping purposes. If I had to face off against someone with one of those, I don't want to face off that meat cleaver.
I have a scalpel that I use for cutting bits of paper, and it's so insanely sharp, man. Like I could cut your friggin' carotid artery with that.
Yeah. The thing is, if people intend to do harm to others, there is no weapons ban that will be effective.
They're going to find a way.
And if people don't intend to do harm to others, there is no weapon ban that is ever going to be necessary. And so the issue is intent, and the issue is specifically in this case, we have rewarded people who hurt others by having this catch and release bail.
And this is like, it's so interesting because I used to be so anti-guns, right? Like that, because that's what was indoctrinated to us. Like, oh, it's great that we don't have guns, yada, yada, yada. I used to go to America and like, I'm one of those people, I love firing guns. Like every time I go to America, I'm like, let's go to a range.
That little ping of you hitting a metal target at like 150, 200 metres is so good. Yeah.
I love firing a revolver. Like just putting in the 6 bullets and then...
No. I'm a semi-automatic guy myself.
That is fun, but no, there's something about the revolver because you get this massive,
you like old school. Yeah, the recoil on them tends to be bad because the centre of the barrel tends to be higher.
Mark Twain, like choo choo choo.
No. Honestly, give me an AR-15. Or actually, honestly, I really loved my time with the Steyr, which is the Australian issue assault rifle. Not assault weapon. That is a political made-up definition of weapon that doesn't exist. An assault rifle is a medium caliber detachable magazine select fire rifle. All right, so it's a proper thing. So the only way you get to play with assault rifles here in Australia is if you're a licensed hunter. Even then, the magazine sizes are very small, or if you're in the military.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I loved playing with the Steyr. But actually, as a weapons platform, I really liked it.
Well, in Vietnam, you can actually fire some serious weapons.
Yeah, but they're all like bolted down and stuff now. They've taken all the fun out of it.
That wasn't as fun.
Yeah.
But I sat behind an M60 and
Yeah. You feel the muzzle blast off those. Yeah.
But like we were all indoctrinated to believe, oh, guns are bad, whatever. And then, sure enough, like as things are unfolding, I'm sitting here going, hang on a minute, like, if the government's not going to protect me from being assaulted from some Sudanese who's going to come in here and try and like put a machete to my throat to steal my car, I deserve some way to fight back. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to go, maybe guns are. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm with you. I'm out and proud pro-gun. Have been for about 15 years. But again, I had to go on a similar journey. I was, back when John Howard banned guns, 1996. I was in the cult of the Liberal Party. I was raised in a Christian home, but our holy trinity was God the Father, God the Son, and God the Johnny Howard. Like we had, this sort of almost idolatry issue with government. And so when Johnny Howard said we had to go into the Iraq War, well, obviously that's the right thing to do. Yeah. Johnny Howard says we've got to get rid of the guns. Oh, well, I guess that's the right thing to do, and which of course I recognise now is just stupid and naive.
Yeah.
But I supported the band at the time, and then it was my time in the army. My attitudes were already softening, but 20 years ago I went into the army and I just went, I'm surrounded by a bunch of larrikin dudes exactly the same as any football club, as any pub, as any workplace, and they're walking around with automatic weapons, and I'm not the least bit scared of them, and they are not the least bit scared of me. Yeah. Then I went and spent time in Texas working on a pilot TV project over there, and discovered that every second person on the set was carrying a concealed firearm.
Yeah.
When I was the villain, and we had a big fight sequence at the end involving 3 different guns, and. Can I tell you the story?
Yeah, please do.
So we're on the second to top floor of a multi-level car park filming. It was 110-degree Fahrenheit day, and I'm in a 3-piece suit.
Dude, I need you to give me that in English.
40-something plus, right. like well over. And I'm in a 3-piece suit, as you do when you're in like a B grade aimed at kids, villain kind of thing. But the fight sequence was pretty serious. And in the end, one of the reasons why the pilot never got picked up was because they said, well, we can't tell what audience it's for. Some of it's clearly aimed at kids and some of it's completely inappropriate for kids. And the fight was definitely not appropriate for kids. But we have a big fight, and it involves a number of guns and discharging weapons basically at each other's heads, which of course we did with special effects and with sort of tricks to make sure it was safe. But they were real guns. Mm. They were real guns that we were using non-real ammunition in. And before every single take, every single gun got rechecked by the director, by myself, by the other actor involved, and by the armourer on set. Because it's like, if someone just needs to put it, look at what happened.
Well, I was going to say that happened to Alec Baldwin.
But and these were just, they didn't have budget for the guns. Yeah. People just brought guns and said, oh, yeah, okay, so this gun will get carried by that character, that gun will get carried by that character. I had an AR-10 with a suppressor on it. Yeah. Because one of the friends of the director was a ex-police officer who had the license to have the suppressor, because that's a licensed thing over there. And I got to go out shooting with that for real, just to get used to it, get used to handling it and everything. I love them, absolutely love them. And yes, we should absolutely be allowed to protect ourselves and our homes and our families and our loved ones with them.
That's
100%.
Where I'm at. But do you want to hear a side little note? I'm just checking that they still do. The NRA follow me on Instagram. I have no idea why. Yeah, do they still follow me? They do.
Okay, blue tick and everything.
It's literally the National Rifle Association. Yeah, it's
that's them. Yeah, yeah.
They follow me on Instagram. Maybe it's because I'm so pretty. I don't know.
It must be. So to finish that story, I lose the fight in that scene, and I get the crap beat out of me, and I end up all bloodied and everything. And so progressively, they're doing more and more makeup on me, and we're filming the fight chronologically because of the makeup. So we finish all the filming, and then I have to go down and wash off in the bathroom that we're cleared to use, which was in a hotel lobby across the street. Thing was, because of the technicalities of filming in downtown San Antonio with real weapons, I had to keep the AR-10 with me at all times. And there was a police officer that had to come with me at all times. And so I go down from the second to top floor of this multi-story car park, and we go down the stairwell, me and this cop, me with the AR-10 slung muzzle down over my shoulder, face completely bloodied and messed up with very, very realistic looking makeup. And then we walk up to a pedestrian crossing in a busy downtown intersection in the middle of San Antonio. And the looks on people's faces going the other way.
Should we be concerned?
But I had the police officer there, so everyone just decided not to be concerned, but like they were going to be going home and telling stories. And then I had this beautiful moment. It was just this beautiful Hollywood moment. I walk into the actual bathroom and there's a dude already in there, and I walk in there, I got the AR-10 slung over my back, and I start washing up, and he's already washing his hands. He sees me, big double take, and his jaw just kind of drops, and I went, this is the cheesiest thing I've ever done in my life, but I'm never going to have this moment again. And so I took a leaf out of every B-grade movie in history, and I just looked at him and I said, you should see the other guy. And he didn't know what to do.
He would have just been like, wait, am I about to be Jeffrey Dahmer or?
And he left, and he would have been telling that story for you. He's probably still telling that story.
Yeah, that's funny. On a more serious note, back to that murder. So this is where I get really annoyed, right? So essentially, this whole youth crime thing, there's a couple of elements to it. It's opportunistic because there's no consequence. It's also a bit of organised crime. The young kids are easy. They don't get bailed, so they can do the thefts. And the other part is we're in a gang warfare, right? So the African gangs, which they said are not happening, are very much happening. And I put up something on my Instagram the other day, and I think I put it on X too, where I was talking about it's not African gangs, it's Sudanese. We need to be really specific. There are 54 countries in Africa. I know Nigerians, I know Ghanans, I know Kenyans. They're not the ones robbing cars and walking around with machetes. It's the Sudanese. And then, of course, I had someone going, anyway, whatever. So this person who got murdered was 24, was also in a Sudanese gang. And if you can believe it, what do you think the murder was over?
Oh, gosh. Well, these people don't fight over nothing. So I'm going to say it was over at least $14 million worth of precious jewels.
It was over a diss rap track.
Oh.
Yeah, so these teenagers and children are creating diss rap tracks and putting them on social media and then murdering each other over them.
So for those of us who aren't like the cool kids on the block, a diss rap track is like where they insult each other?
Yes, basically. You talk shit about someone.
So this murder was over people talking shit?
Yes.
Well, it turns out they do kill each other for no reason. Who knew?
And this is the thing that's really pissing me off. I'm like, we need to have a proper conversation about what's going on here. Like these teenagers who have been raised to believe that ghetto culture is something to reach to. It's some kind of like awesome, cool thing to be a part of. You've seen people from affluent communities who are going and wanting to become more ghetto, right? To be cooler by association. Here's a pop culture thing for you. I'm not fully across it, so forgive me if I get the details wrong. Travis Barker, drummer of Blink-182. You know what I'm talking about? He has a young daughter named Alabama. Alabama was as sweet as pie, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, like little country singer, pop singer, right? Cute, blonde, all sweet American. Yeah. Has decided to make herself ghetto and wants to compete with, I joke you not, Cash Me Outside girl on the internet. Remember Cash Me Outside?
Yes.
Sadly,
regrettably, I do, yes.
Yeah, so Cash Me Outside is now called Bad Barbie. And to be fair, she's actually not a bad rapper, but she's proper ghetto. She grew up in the ghetto. That's her culture. That's what she knows, right? And just to be like obvious here, these are white girls as well. These aren't African American. They're white girls. Yeah. And so Alabama, whose parents, like, you know, Travis married a Kardashian. Yeah. They've got to be worth.
They're worth a lot of money. Yeah.
Right.
Triple digits, like $150 or something.
No, as in 150 billion, come on. Like, who knows, right? And so now she wants to go be ghetto, right? And there's all, like, rap diss track. If you go and watch these rap tracks, it's like teenagers acting like idiots. And now Melbourne is being held in a gang war over teenagers talking about rap diss tracks. Like, come on, how unserious can we be?
So for me, and I don't love culture war stuff. I really don't. I loathe it. But I think it has to be said. The experiment of raising kids without fathers in their home and telling ourselves culturally that kids don't need dads, that experiment doesn't seem to be going very well right now.
Shit. Did you fear your father?
I feared my mother more than my father. because she was very volatile. She was the one with the temper when I was little. But there were consequences when you stepped out of line.
Yeah.
Absolutely, of course there were. And it's insane to think that we would raise kids without that. You get told by your mum, first thing on a Saturday morning, get out of the house, I don't want to see your face again until the streetlights come on. Don't come home, for the love of all that is good in God's green earth, don't come home at when your mum doesn't want to see you. But you better be on the doorstep within 5 minutes of those lights coming on.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just what you did. It's you learned to be accountable to those words. Otherwise, best case scenario, you're not going out next weekend. Worst case scenario, obviously, much worse.
I mean, my dad and I are so similar. We are cut from the I look like my dad, I act like my dad, which is probably pretty terrifying for him. And I think because we were so similar, we just...
Yeah, butted heads.
Never got along. And I don't speak about my family much. I'm not in contact with them, but I hated my dad because I was terrified of him in the sense that, if dad was bad cop, when the law got put down, and he never, it was never particularly mean, it was the voice. It was the booming voice.
No,
right.
Put the fear of God in you.
And my name's 2 syllables, Carly. I'm like, oh, shit. And then they throw in the middle name and then you were absolutely stuffed. But there was something about I knew what my boundaries were and you could sort of bounce those boundaries. And then when you hit that hard wall, holy shit. And I'll never forget, I tried to go to a party once and my parents were so open about alcohol. They're like, we would rather buy it for you and know what you're doing than do it behind our back. Whatever you want, we'll buy it. Just let me know. Yep. And I think because they took away that,
the appeal. Yeah.
I used to go to a party with 4 lemon muskies and not even touch them. I was like, Coke tastes way better. The drink. Anyway. I went to go to this party and I didn't think much of it, but I was wearing I'll paint the picture for you. I was wearing a white sweater. I was wearing a denim miniskirt, fishnet stockings, and black boots. What do you think my father thought?
Well, I will tell you that every other young man saw that ensemble and thought, open for business.
Correct.
Yeah.
My father was like, I didn't raise a prostitute for a daughter. That was probably the scariest moment because my girlfriends were with me. We're all getting ready to go to the party and my friends were just like, your dad's really scary. And that, he just had to yell.
Yeah.
And I was like,
The thing is though, when done right, what a father is doing in that situation is actually extending an umbrella of protection. Because where are you going to come running to if ever if ever there's any real trouble, and if your dad is weak, if your dad can't even scare you, then is he really going to scare the monsters that you need him to scare away? Right? There comes a point. It's this thing of, I think it was I don't think it was Tolkien. I think it was Lion, the Witch and Wardrobe author. C.S. Lewis. I believe it was him who said, if children are going to have to face monsters in their life, let them at least have heard of valiant knights, right? And so when we establish that authority, and we say, you are inside of my domain, and yes, my house, my rules, and you may not like all of those rules, you may not understand why some of those rules are there.
You sound exactly like him when you have your own house one day.
And maybe my rules aren't right, but they're my rules.
Correct.
Right?
This is my house.
This is my house. And I'm going to raise you to one day be able to take authority over your own house and protect it and protect the children that come into it and all of that. And I think it's actually necessary. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this. Being weak doesn't make you virtuous.
Yeah.
Being strong
being a monster does.
Being a monster and then harnessing it for good purposes. My definition of masculinity is strength in service. Yeah. Your weakness is not masculinity. Strength put into service towards others. And that's what a father is doing when they protect their family. That reservation.
They said it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Correct.
But, I was just thinking then, when we used to go to, little house parties and stuff, my dad used to bitch about it. He used to call himself the local taxi, but he was always there at 1 a.m. to pick us up. And it was always my dad. And there was another friend whose dad would pick us up occasionally, but he was a traffic controller at the airport, so he was on shift work. Yeah. But my dad would pick us up and you would be ready at 1 a.m. and you would be waiting there ready to go. There was no mucking about.
If buts or maybes, yep.
And I used to be like, oh, my dad's here.
Yeah.
But now I look back and go, yeah, he was. My dad was there. Where was your dad?
Yeah, exactly.
And everyone knew Peter. Fucking watch out.
Good. All right, next. Come on.
Okay, so that was that. So, yeah, just the crime thing, right? I think it's going to be a long time before we see that happen. But then that brings me to, and this blows my mind, and I think you and I are on the same page. Peter Dutton wants a referendum to determine whether or not we should deport people. I'm sorry, but I just...
Okay. I had exactly the same initial reaction. But
I read Kobe's thing.
Thank you to Kobe. She did set me straight because I'm doing a million other things. I hadn't researched that yet. Apparently this is necessary because, and this is a problem with activism within the judiciary, they go back to the Constitution and they find something, some reason to be able to do the thing that they want to do. And then in order to change that, it's not just legislation. It's you have to go to a referendum.
Yeah.
You have to change the wording in the Constitution in order to undo that. So this is the work of some kind of an activist federal court judge who has found a reason to stop the government from rescinding citizenship.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe that it would stop them from doing it to people that aren't Australian citizens. I believe it only would actually affect... I haven't researched it yet, and I probably will never get around to this one. This is just one of those ones that'll fall off the side of the desk. But I believe when it comes to people with dual citizenship, there is a constitutional amendment necessary, but I don't believe that's true for everybody else.
Yeah, my initial reaction was like, are you joking? We just had a $600 million referendum. That was just such a waste of money. And I think my issue with Dutton, right, is like he's trying to be Trump light. He's seeing bits and elements, but just go full Trump. That's what people want. You want someone hardline.
He is not even the Trump you get when you order your Trump from Temu.
No.
Like, he's not even Temu Trump. He's an embarrassment. It's actually, it really annoys me when I see the Greens or Labor saying, oh, Dutton is Australia's Trump. I wish. Could you please send him the memo that he needs to step
Someone
up
with a spine
and actually be Australia's Trump?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is too with Dutton and stuff like that, it's like you can see they're so worried about the polls. All they care about are their polls. I'm like, have you ever been in a room with a normal person? Like, I know that they only walk the halls of Parliament, but just step outside in your electorate, for God's sakes, and talk to the average person. No one is going to be like, oh, no, don't deport them. Get rid of them, which brings me to my mate, Nayab Bukele, who I've been bloody talking about.
I knew this was going to come up this week. I knew you were going to bring this up.
Oh, Nayab and we're going to have, I don't drink beer, but we'll have a Coke Zero together. I don't know. Like,
you'll have a Virgin Mary together or something.
I'm going to meet Nayab and I'm going to give him the biggest hug. I think he's a superstar, right?
Okay, all right.
You know how I feel about CCOT. Anyway, so he's taken in, so he's turning CCOT, and you could, depends the way you look at it.
Okay, not everyone's been with us on the journey. Some people will be watching this for the very first time. Who is Nayab Bukele and what is CCOT?
So Nayab Bukele is the president of El Salvador, which used to be the homicide capital of the world, and now it's one of the safest countries in the world. It's in South America. For those
Funny how that happens when you lock all of the murderers up.
Correct. El Salvador used to be held at ransom by a crime gang called MS-13, along with other criminals. And MS-13 were so, non-human. It didn't matter who you are, they would murder you. Zero respect for life. And in 18 months, they built a maximum security prison that is a fortress. Absolutely indomitable fortress. You cannot get out. And his whole thing is humiliation. So these gang people are fully covered in face tattoos, MS-13, the whole thing. They're gangbangers, whatever. They are being humiliated, not in any barbaric way. And people would argue there's a fine line between human rights here, but they basically have to stand there in their white short underwear and sit there with their heads down and, it's to humiliate it. These people thought they were drunk on power, right? They had the run of El Salvador.
They run the streets and blah, blah, blah.
So CCOT's the name of the prison, and 18 months he cleaned up El Salvador. And
there's also in that prison as well, I believe it's in that prison, but it's certainly within the system, they're extremely long working hours. They're putting these guys to work.
So what I was going to say, and not only that, they're not in individual cells, they're in collective cells. And I think it's 100 in each cell. So all the bunks are in the one space. And there's this giant, go and Google CCOT, there's this giant corridor and these massive cells with 100 people. And what they're forcing them to do is learn skills. Now, people say this is labour camp. What they're doing is putting them on sewing machines or whatever, and they're making things like they used to back in the day. So they're putting them to work, and they'll never be let out of prison. That's non-negotiable. They're done. They're done for life. But they are forcing them to participate, and if they participate, they relax some of the rules and they get some perks and things like that. So it's essentially, you're never going to rehabilitate these people. These people, when I say murder, I mean like responsible for like 20, 30 people dying. You can't rehabilitate those people.
So here's where I do have issues, and I'm not some bleeding heart liberal. But there will be people in there who, without question, were guilty of 20, 30 murders. There will be other people there who were on the fringes of the gang because in their part of the world, MS-13 ran the streets. And if you weren't in the gang, and they're now also suffering the same fate. And so this is where I say, if someone has been found guilty of 20 to 30 murders, I have no issue with any of that. Fantastic. That's a real justice system at work, short of executing them, which, I have some reservations about the death penalty, but in principle I'm not opposed, but there has to be a lot of protections around it. But short of a death penalty, if someone's a serial killer, absolutely. Yeah. The problem is that we saw people get swept up based on face tattoos and association, and all of them be condemned without individual trial. And I understand they had a massive problem to fix and to deal with, but what I would want to see is a process where they're going through and actually putting some of these guys on trial that aren't just open and shut cases. Some of the ones that you're like, well, actually, we don't really know who you are. You don't really have a big police record. We don't should you be here or not? Yeah. And the other thing as well is psychologically, if you want these people to rehabilitate in any way and not just have that place turn into a hell of its own, then there has to be the hope of release. There has to be the hope of life after. So there's a few things there, but also to expand that out, the reason why you're talking about it this week is because Trump just deported a plane of, was it Trent which is a Venezuelan street gang. Again, similar kind of cut from the same cloth, very violent, lots of murders, all the rest of it. Scooped them up, flew them out to El Salvador, and essentially turning El Salvador into a private prison.
Correct. Yeah.
And there's a few layers to that. Yeah. I have largely the same reservations. It's sort of a case of, okay, there are people that you don't necessarily have to have gone through a full court case to have confidence that you've got the right person, but there are going to be other people that you're like, well, but he was always with him. Yeah, but what did he do? Yeah. Why was he always with him? Yeah. We don't know. On
paper, I totally get it when you say things like that, but where I come to it from, I try to come from like that very logical kind of reasoning, and it's like, the problem was so out of hand, so out of control. You can't fix it without sweeping change. And whilst, yes, there are going to be some people who get caught up in it, maybe who shouldn't be there, but unfortunately, like when it's that bad and it's been ignored for so long, that's the price to pay. Now, it's like civilian casualties in a war. You don't want them. Unfortunately, sometimes it happens. I'm not saying it's good.
Yeah.
But
and I can understand that logic, but what I would definitely want to see, if that's the decision, then you owe it to your own population and to a commitment to, just as a commitment to human rights, to then go back, having, you might say, well, we have to do dramatic action. We can't put them on trial and then lock them up. Okay, fine. Then lock them up and then put them on trial. Yeah. If it's really that bad and things are that far out of control, but don't hold them for the rest of their days without even a trial. That is a gross abuse of human rights. Yeah. So that's where I would like to see them going, okay, we think you're all horrible, but for the ones that we can't actually just point to, well, we know you did that, we know you did that, we know you did that, open and shut. For the ones that aren't in that category, let's actually take the time.
Well, the reason I brought up Nayib Bukele is his popularity amongst his own people is over 90%. Which is insane.
Oh, when you go from the murder capital of the world, the streets being run by some of the worst human beings you can imagine. Yeah. Because as much as I'm expressing concern about human rights, I do not deny the problem. Yeah. I do not deny the reality that the vast majority of those people that have MS-13 face tattoos, they are not nice people. No. And having them off the streets is going to lead to 90% popularity, much better quality of life.
And it's no different to what Trump's doing. Like Trump is deporting criminals, rapists, serial murderers, like drug pushers, like people who are the worst of the worst. And most people, when you like lay it out factually, not with like the hyperbole from the liberal media, people go, yeah, I agree, get them out.
That's right.
And so when Dutton's like, oh, we want a referendum, I'm like, dude, I don't think most people wouldn't want that. But now that you've explained that, I was like, okay. But this is the thing. Say that. Yeah. We would like to deport people, but it's going to require constitutional change. We want to do that for you guys.
Well, he would say that is what he's saying. I would say that it was a completely unnecessary own goal, because anyone that's not an Australian citizen, this doesn't apply to. And so you can say, yes, we will deport everybody. What about the Australian citizens? Oh, well, that's going to take longer. Yeah. But if they're not an Australian citizen, we will deport convicted criminals after they serve their sentence.
And to be honest, this is my set. I mean, we talked about this on a couple of podcasts before when we were talking about importing people from either Afghanistan or Iran or Gaza. And I have massive hesitations around that. I believe everyone deserves a chance. But having said that, when you look at the generational hate of the Palestinians for the Western way of life, I don't really believe that we're going to be importing people who have these altruistic mindsets of wanting to see a better life. I don't believe that.
And here's the other angle to that. There are people that we know are going to integrate better whose current situation is just as dire or arguably worse. Look at Christians in Syria right now.
Horrific.
Right? We know that they're going to integrate better over here, and we've got long history of that. We know that people from Christian cultures integrate better than people from non-Christian cultures into Australia. We've got long history on that. Syrian Christians are in mortal danger. They are being massacred in their homes and in their villages. There's an actual genocide going on, not to minimise. I mean, living in a war zone is horrific. The situation in Gaza is awful, truly. But there are other cultures that mesh much better with theirs.
I agree. And the thing about Gaza and Israel, again, I always stay away from it because it's like no one, you'll never win.
You can't win.
So I'm just not interested in having that argument or screaming match. But these people arguably hate us. And whilst I would like to see Gaza fixed in some way, I don't know what that looks like because I don't know what they want. But they hate us generationally. They don't want us to do well. We're going to import that here. Doesn't align with our values. And whilst I don't want them to suffer, why? And I know why Egypt's not taking. I know why Jordan's not taking them.
That's the smoking. That's the red flag. That's the alarm bell.
Do you know what's interesting? I was having this discussion with someone who was Arab. I can't remember what nationality they were. I want to say maybe they were Lebanese. I can't remember. And we're having this chat, and it was very, I love it when people want to chat to me because I love it when I learn something, right? So I'm not saying I know everything. It's foreign geopolitical stuff is, outside my wheelhouse. But this person, I think they were Lebanese, they were talking to me about why Egypt and Jordan won't take the Gazans. And they're like, no, it's because this is their point of view. They're like, if Egypt or Jordan takes them, then they're helping the Gazans lose their land and they don't want to be part of it. They want them to stay in Gaza. And I was like, interesting.
No, and see, multiple things can be true at once.
Yeah.
That can be one of the considerations. But another way of expressing the exact same thing is that having the Gazans as a thorn in the side of Israel is useful to them geopolitically.
Yeah.
That's the exact same thing expressed two different ways.
Yeah.
Okay. But also the reality is, and we know this from things that were said, from the 1960s onwards, these countries do not want the so-called Palestinian people, the people that are now in Gaza, because they have not been raised with anything resembling an education as you or I know it. They're, even by the standards of the Middle East, and I say even only because they are modernising, relatively speaking, a decade or two behind us, right? But even by the educational standards of the Middle East, the people of Gaza are way behind. And you say they've been raised on multi-generational hate. Sadly, that's true. I would respond and say that also isn't their fault.
No.
It's not the fault of a 16-year-old Gazan kid that all he has ever been told is that he is one day going to fight and die to try and kill Jews. It's not his fault that that's what he was told since he was a kid. Sadly, that those actions are still unacceptable despite the fact that that's not his fault. And then you end up with these horrific situations like what we have unfolding.
Yeah, it's one of those indomitable puzzles that I don't know how you fix it. And it's the same with there's parts about Afghanistan. I think what's happening with the Taliban right now is just horrific. I've read so many books about the Taliban prior to Desert Storm, right?
Yeah.
Was it Desert Storm?
No, Desert Storm was Iraq. So
the first one before Russia took over.
So this is pre-1980s.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at photographs of Kabul.
Yeah, beautiful.
Or for that matter, Tehran in Iran, etc. These parts of the world, prior to the Islamist takeovers, these are phenomenal places that look, and those photos and those fashions and those people and those educations and those ways of living would have been absolutely at home in England or America or Australia at the time.
Yeah, and Afghanistan was one of those countries I've always wanted to go. I love the Middle East. I love the culture. I love the architecture. I love the food and the people. Like I said, I've only ever known just beautiful hospitality. I think Islam is very different to Muslim, which is very different to Arab, which is very different to Middle East. I think, you've got to be careful. There's always nuance. But what I have discovered, when I read all that stuff prior to Russia coming in to Afghanistan and then story of what happened to Kabul, it's tragic, utterly tragic. And you hear the stories from civilians, right? And now that's playing it out again. And I don't know how many of you guys know what's going on with the Taliban now, but we don't hear about Afghanistan anymore. Remember, it was like 3 years ago, everyone's like, oh, and then it just...
Well, because we no longer have troops over there, which in my opinion is a good thing. But the way that withdrawal was done was you could not have done it worse. If you were strategically trying to do the worst possible withdrawal, it was like the fall of Saigon.
Yeah.
Only it was completely self-inflicted. There was no reason why it had to go that way.
And then they left $80 billion worth of war.
Okay, so let me push back on that a little bit because that's something that Trump's been banging on about. But I think that's an ill-advised move because most of the material that was left behind had already seen at least a decade of war. Remember, they were in Afghanistan for 20 years. So most of that stuff was well and truly clapped out. In the case of helicopters, some media and unfortunately, right-wing bloggers and that sort of stuff were banging on about, we're leaving behind helicopters, we're leaving behind this and that. Yes, but with all of the electronics ripped out. And you know what a helicopter without electronics is worth?
Useless.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Utterly nothing. The war fighters that were withdrawing did not want to leave functioning weapons behind. And in terms of the high-value stuff, they didn't. Yes, piles of M4s and what have you, yes, okay, that's true and that's a problem. But again, botched withdrawal. But so I come back again to this verse in Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs, Solomon famously being the wisest man who ever lived. And the language that he uses can sometimes be a little bit obscure, but the meaning can be understood very, very clearly. He who meddles in business that is not his own is like one who takes a dog by the ears. Right? You grab a big dog by the ears, now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Now it's more angry at you than ever, and you cannot let go of this thing.
Yeah.
There's no way out of this. Someone's going to get hurt now.
Yeah.
Right? That's what happens when America does something like invading Afghanistan and doing regime change. 20 years later, we're still holding that dog by the ears going, how do I get out of this situation? And we see that withdrawal.
Yeah, and just seeing what's happening to the women over there, it's just I actually find it so uncomfortable. I can't sort of read it at times because it's just heartbreaking. But I don't know where I was going with this whole Afghanistan thing. I've lost my train of thought. Just talking about cleaning it up and importing people who don't like our way of life. Yeah, I have concerns and reservations around it.
So, but again, it's kind of like, well, if Afghani women wanted to come here as asylum seekers, I'd be much more open to that. Yeah. What we saw on the boats, of course, famously photograph after photograph of the boats when Christmas Island was open and all of that, was a whole bunch of Afghani males of fighting age, healthy. They could be working jobs, and where are their wives and kids? They've managed to travel with a passport all the way to Indonesia, and then all of a sudden they're arriving on Christmas Island without one, having paid $20,000 to a people smuggler. Yeah. Like something seems up here. And I feel like our compassion is being weaponized, is being gamed, where we're being manipulated by people with money and power and agendas to take people that aren't good for us. And as a result, we're not getting the Syrian Christians, the Afghani women, these sorts of people that really genuinely need somewhere to go.
And I totally agree with you, but I also think the more we focus on geopolitical issues, the more we ignore what we need to be doing here. And there are parts of the American First agenda that I'm like, yes, clean up your fentanyl crisis.
Yes.
Clean up those flyover states who are just destitute.
Yeah. And Trump has said, and I'm jumping into a topic for that I think was meant for a little bit later, Trump has announced coal is king.
Yes.
Coal is on its way back. And a lot of those destitute towns are destitute for one of two reasons.
They ripped out the coal mines.
They shuttered the coal mines, or they shuttered the steel production, which relies on coal, so iron and coal to make steel. The bringing back of coal is going to bring all of those back. And if Trump delivers on his cheapest energy in the world promise, we're going to watch a transformed America. This whole idea that all the manufacturers moving to China and then from there it'll go to Africa, blah, blah, blah. Nope. It's going to go right back to America, because in today's world, energy as an input cost is higher than wages.
Yes.
So a country with low energy but high wages like America is going to be competitively still at an advantage than a country like Africa with low cost wages but also relatively unskilled and relatively low productivity and high electricity, because they've signed up to all the IMF nonsense, all the World Bank nonsense, where they get loans but only if they do them green.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, there's documentaries about Appalachia, even JD's stories and things like that, and you just think of these were burgeoning beautiful towns, and now they're just and that's why you see things like the fentanyl crisis, because these people have got nothing to do. And I get it.
Shout out to the boys from the Ep11 podcast. I will tag you guys so that you hopefully see this. I hope to be back in America for America's 250th birthday, and I want to come and see you guys for July 4th, 2026, 250 years of America, and I expect the biggest damn explosions I have ever seen on
I think we should do our podcast there.
We should.
I think we
and it
should.
should be live. So the Appalachian podcast, guys, it's amazing, hilarious group of guys. We met in Washington, D.C. when I was speaking at a conference over there. I clocked off and we got wasted on some of their moonshine. I got rip-snorting drunk and then had to do two interviews afterwards because of two people that were like, I really wanted to interview, and they said, oh, we're leaving. We're not going to be here tomorrow after all. So you need to interview us now or you're not at all. And I'm like, oh, no. So I had to do two really drunk interviews because I'd gotten absolutely hammered with these guys. Hilarious. And so, yes, for America's 250th birthday, we will be in America, and all going well, guys, if you see this, you let me know, and then it's on. We'll be in Appalachia.
We'll shoot some guns.
They know how to have fun.
Yeah, I want to have fun.
The guns, the explosions, the fireworks, the bonfires.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
America.
Yeah, America.
I want a proper America experience.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's bring it back home for a little bit, because we've gone pretty
We have gone all
across
over the place.
the continent. All right, so let's talk about this report that came out, because it ties into two topics that I want to talk about. One, you know how last week I told you Adam Bandt was going to be on Abby Chatfield's podcast?
Yes.
Do you want to cringe so bad that you'll melt in your seat?
So I think I need to start doing videos where you send me clips. And I have to do reacts to the clips, because I think that would be like viral viewing.
We should make that a series. I just read it out to you.
I cringe so hard with this stuff. All right, hit me.
I have secondhand. I don't know what they call it, but like when you feel secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah, that's what I call it.
And I feel it as if it's happening to me, and I'm like, oh god. Anyway, this clip went viral. Adam Bandt is at some it was at Nightcat in Fitzroy of all places, and
don't ruin the Nightcat for me. I have wonderful memories from there.
He's behind the DJ decks with Abby Chatfield playing none other than Taylor Swift, and they're all singing, and he's like. The video's there. Go watch it.
The Nightcat is dead to me.
And they've got all these green lights. And it's like the party of the unwashed. You just know that room stinks of body odour.
To be fair, the Nightcat and the Conga Room and all those salsa dancing clubs, they always stink of beer.
Yeah, that's kind of like I want cigarettes to come back, because at least that masks
sort of
the
covered
smell.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, the BO smells bleh.
Okay, so that's fine. You know what? I don't actually mind Taylor Swift. Some of her stuff is really clever. Some of her stuff is really clever.
But what I'm saying is, you hate billionaires, you're anti-capitalism, but you're literally streaming the billionaire's song to your people whilst banging on about socialism.
But if greenies didn't have double standards, they would have no standards at all. Can we talk about Adam Bandt and his 4-day workweek brainwave?
That was my thing.
Okay, so we're not skipping too far ahead.
Did you read my essay on this?
I read yours. I had a little rant of my own, not as extensive as yours. You made a couple of points that I didn't think of, and that's a compliment to you. It doesn't often happen.
Follow me on X at Carlz J Soda.
Yes, definitely do. And this is there's a joke about why don't the communists have any why don't communists have any economists? Because if you understand economics, you won't be a communist.
Correct.
This is like economics fail 101. Take us through it.
All right. So essentially, Adam Bandt is coming in. He will make it happen if he gets into the leadership, that there will be a 4-day work week for the same pay but for less hours. So it's not 4 10-hour weeks. It's
10-hour days, which I would love, by the way.
I'm for that.
I would much rather do 40 hours in 4 days.
I would love that.
Yep.
No, I'll read you his quote because I'll get it right.
Yep.
The Greens will pave the way for a 4-day work week. That's less hours but the same pay. For too long, productivity gains have resulted in profits for bosses and shareholders while workers burn out. With successful trials across the world, it's time we follow suit here.
Deal with the cost of living. This will actually drive inflation. This will make it worse.
100%.
Because if workers now have a 3-day weekend, which is great, but also you're now going to spend on more consumption, because you, instead of having 48 hours to enjoy yourself, you've now got 72 and you're going to spend more. Okay, let's put that aside for one moment, because that's a discretionary thing. People can do that or not. So let's just leave that for a moment. Businesses are now paying the same amount of money for fewer hours, which by definition is going to result in lower productivity,
Correct.
which means they have to recoup that money from a fewer number of units of products or services. Whatever it is that they make, they've got less of them for the same cost. That means the shelf price has to go up. That means that person who was celebrating, oh, I only have to work 4 days for the same pay, will then immediately within a month or two be screaming, my money doesn't keep up with inflation, I need to be paid more.
Correct.
It's like, how could someone, this is what I said, how can someone his age still be that ignorant?
Well, I mean, obviously I've been in small business my whole life, and I look at that and go, hang on a minute, so my outlays and my overheads stay the same, but my output decreases. That means I'm going to cut staff. It's that simple. I'm going to have to step back onto the production line myself, cut the staff, which means job crisis.
Okay. Do you know why Australia was the very first country where McDonald's trialled their kiosks, their self-by-yourself kiosks? One, smaller market, and that's better for a whole bunch of logistical reasons. Two, very, very high minimum wage.
Yeah.
And because we have such a high minimum wage, it was Australia where they stood to gain the most.
Yeah.
So the higher you make the minimum wage, the more employers are going to be willing to spend to reduce hours.
Which is why
automation AI and everything else.
It makes a very viable decision for your company. And this is what people don't realise. People go, oh, you're a business owner, you must have millions. People don't realise the overheads, and the overheads are things that you don't see, whether it's pay-as-you-go tax, whether it's work cover, it's super, it's all these extra things. Everyone goes, oh, yes, but the employee deserves them. Like, not if they aren't actually productive.
Yeah. So in a properly functioning free market where every transaction is voluntary, the definition of a free market is very simple. Every single transaction has two sides, the person selling, the person buying. If both sides are voluntary and they're not being coerced or manipulated in what they decide or how they decide to do it, then it's a free market. Simple as that. The way it works is this. Every time someone comes up with something innovative and different, new and better, they will be able to charge a significant premium for that thing because they're the only one with it. But the nature of the market is soon people copy it or soon people improve on that further or what have you, and competition begins to cut the margins. This is what's referred to as an industry maturing.
Yeah.
So an innovative or a disruptive industry is a high margin. There's a lot of opportunity. It's high risk, high reward. Then that industry will mature. So take, for example, cars.
Yeah.
Cars, automotive manufacturing is among the most mature industries in the world right now. Car manufacturers are building a car that will ultimately get sold for, let's say, $60,000. The manufacturer is making maybe $1,500 to $2,000 out of that car. Okay. Their margins are razor thin by the time all the other costs. The governments are getting more in tax out of that car purchase than the car manufacturer is keeping in profits.
Yeah.
You take something like Walmart. People complain, oh, Walmart or the supermarkets here in Australia, oh, they're making billions of dollars in profit.
They're not.
Yes, on phenomenal hundreds of billions in turnover.
Yeah.
Their margins are razor thin because it's a mature business. It's a mature industry. And so actually when Adam Bandt says, oh, productivity is just leading to super profits. No, volume is leading to super profits. Improvements in productivity increase the competition. You know, I say to people who complain about the supermarkets, I say, well, why don't you just go to the local butcher, the local baker, the local greengrocer? Oh, they're more expensive. Huh, funny. How they're not the ones price gouging, but they're more expensive than the ones who are price gouging?
Yeah.
Help me out here. Okay. Mature industry at scale, razor thin margins. Efficiency does not go directly into the profits of shareholders. And by the way, even if it did, that's just a function of there not being enough competition yet.
Yeah.
And when other competitors see them making lots of money, the competition arrives.
I'm going to argue another point here,
Sure.
and I see this happening, and it's already happening, and I see this in my partner's business, I see it in my business, is that this is going to trigger, obviously, an unemployment crisis, but further to that, it's going to send Aussie jobs offshore because, A, it's too expensive to hire them already, and B, they don't want to work. You need that productivity, you're going to go to someone else who will work that. And then we're already seeing this with migrants here, and I want to tell you a story in a second, but migrants already outwork Aussies.
They have since the 80s,
Correct.
at least, probably longer.
And like Aussies, you're going to get your backs up against this. So you're like, oh, work-life balance, I should be able... No. Like, this is the thing. You want to work 9 to 5 and still earn 100,000 plus and have all the perks of someone that works 100-hour week in their business. It doesn't work that way.
They're taking our jobs kind of nonsense. It's like, well, dude, if someone can walk off a boat with no English, no friends, no capital behind them and be more productive than you don't deserve your job.
So I want to tell you this story about a client I shot last week who's Brazilian. So Brazil, as we know, is just absolutely just falling into socialist chaos, has been poor for a very long time. And the disparity between the poor and the very rich in Brazil is like huge, right?
Yeah.
Like most of them live in slums. And I don't think people realize that. You think Sao Paulo and you're like, oh, it's all amazing. No, it's not. Most of Brazil is below the poverty line. And so they've migrated here. It's a husband and wife. They came here not speaking a single word of English. They only spoke Portuguese. And, it's very difficult to find Portuguese translators, but they made it their mission to learn English. And then COVID happened, right? So they couldn't go to in-person classes. They had to learn offline and go to things, and it was really hard. So they turned their phones into English. So from Portuguese to English, they were watching English-speaking TV, even though they didn't understand it, to try and pick it up, to try and get the accent. Now, they had no skills. They had skills in Brazil, but coming here, Aussies look at that and go, you've got no qualifications, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't qualify for any work, and plus it was COVID. The only jobs they could get was cleaning, right? And most Aussies will turn their nose up at honest work. I'm not cleaning toilets. I'm not doing that. Ew, I'm not going to be a
mopping
cleaner.
floors. Don't you know I went to university?
Correct.
Yeah, to study gender studies.
Yeah. Like for a Bachelor of Arts, the most non-specific thing you could do. And, so they got a job during COVID, basically doing commercial cleaning and, cleaning public toilets, things like that. And they've worked their way up, and then they started their own business, right? And they got their first client. They worked really hard. And that client said to them, like, you have done more in your 4 hours than our previous companies did in like a month. Like your attention to detail is second to none. And these are people who care. Like they don't just like, vacuum that bit.
This
They're
is
like
just my
moving
job.
things.
Yeah.
They move things out of the way. They empty the bins, all that sort of stuff. All those little 1%ers, right, that stack up. And so much so that this person then gave them another building to do, and so on and so forth, and they've grown their business. So in 6 years, they came here not speaking English, not having any money, and they've built up a multi-million-dollar commercial cleaning company.
Wow.
In 6 years. And the answer they get...
See, that's awesome.
Amazing. That just
so
shows
cool.
you the opportunity in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Now, Australians will sit and go, oh, you can't do anything in Australia, it's too hard. Well, no, you're just not willing to work that hard. I know people are going to get their backs up against
I will
this.
agree it's a lot harder than it should be.
Yeah,
Like,
I
that's
agree.
without question. Government
But
makes it a lot
it's all
harder than it should be.
relative.
But yes.
To us, we go, oh, it's so hard. To someone who's living in squalor, that sounds like opportunity,
Well,
right?
I grew up in Preston, which is in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. It's inner city these days, but back then it was the boonies. And just the next suburb out, Reservoir, was where all the wogs lived. And that's where the wog mansions were. The Italians and the Greeks moved in there, and they were all concreters and what have you. And so they had the white pebble in place of lawns. They had the fountain, the water feature in the middle, a couple of naked
Columns.
cherubs. Yeah, columns spread around.
Lions.
And I used to ride my push bike around a lot. I covered tens of thousands of kilometres on push bike as an early and late teenager. And I got to know that whole part of Melbourne really well. And it was unmistakable that in my area, Preston, was, multi-generational Aussies. We're 5th, 6th generation Aussies, depending on which line you want to count. And we're all in single-storey houses with one second-hand car per family. This is in the 80s and early 90s. These guys, fresh off the boat, or maybe second generation, are in 2-storey mansions with spare bedrooms they don't even know what to do with, and 4 cars in the driveway, 2 of which are brand new. And I remember having this sort of moment where it began to, I'm like, what is going on? Why? And of course, they got here, no money, no language, no contacts, although as more arrived, they sort of stuck together and they helped each other out more. And they worked their asses off. And in 1 to 2 generations, they were already wealthier than my family was, having been there for 5. And that, for me, is one of the things that makes Australia awesome. We are a land of opportunity for people who are willing to work.
Yeah.
What bothers me about what's happened in the last 40 years is that work is no longer rewarded.
No. I'll give you an example. This is a good segue to plug for myself.
We are going to lose that battery in a couple of minutes, though. It's down below 10%.
Ooh, shall we change?
I think we should change, because that also just turbocharges us a little bit to realise we've gone through 3 out of 55 things and we're halfway through the...
We're doing it all right. We're
Yeah.
somehow
Are we?
roping them together.
Okay,
all right.
all
We'll be back in just a short moment.
Don't go anywhere.
A few moments later.
And ta-da! We're back.
I should always do a costume change and make people go, hang on a minute. I'm so confused. Speaking of people not working hard, I need to have a bit of a rant about this. So I've mentored so many photographers, right? Everyone wants to be a photographer, and I that's great. I'm one of those people that it will always support you. If that's what you want to do, great. I don't have a scarcity mindset. But people come to me going, it's impossible to make money out of photography. Sure. It is quite challenging.
It's difficult to make money.
It's a saturated market.
It's a relatively mature industry.
And so people always think, oh, I've got to buy a better camera. I've got to buy this equipment. I've got to do that. I'm like, It's the unsexy stuff that people don't want to do, which I find a lot of Australians will turn their nose up. And I'm generalising, but I can say this. I'm Aussie. But Australians don't like getting their hands dirty. They want to think that, like, I just have to do this and it will all happen for me. No. You want success.
And we think it'll be fast too.
Yeah. No, it is a grind. I have been a photographer now since 2018 was when I first took money for photography.
Yeah.
But I picked up my first DSLR when it was 2014.
Yeah, right.
So it was that 11 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So 11 years of being a photographer. You can imagine my work when I first started was horrendous. But 11 years, I'm only just now making a very comfortable 6 figures.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight.
No.
And you might have some flash in the pants. Yes, that happens.
Yeah,
Like, I never talk about the outliers. I'm talking about your average punter. People's idea of success, that it just happens like this. It doesn't.
Yeah.
You have to accrue a community, right? And this is me plugging my book. Do you like that?
Smooth.
Subtle.
Like it,
So,
Carly. Like it.
I wrote this. Like, I already had this as a guide that I'd send out to my students that I was mentoring.
I actually haven't seen it. Can I?
It's called Six Figure Creative.
I can see that. It's written on the front. 6 Figure Creative.
And essentially all
Not
this
six finger. That's the Princess Bride. That's a different thing.
No, but essentially in this, I call it the unsexy stuff that people want to avoid. Things like how to get collaborated, how to get started, how to immediately get leads,
Just showing off a few of your celebrities that you photographed there in that front cover.
Proof's in the pudding, right? Just me with my friends, Gordon Ramsay and Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
But, talking about where you actually want to go, your branding. I talk about brand archetypes. I talk about how to build a portfolio, a website, what goes into a landing page, how to price your work, how to reach out to people. Like,
I do like this choice of colour like that. That's a lovely orangey, pinky gradient you've got going on there.
Have you seen that I just like colour?
You like big, bold pops of colour.
I am a colour
You are
person.
also the font queen. I have to say, your way with fonts is remarkably good.
It's almost like I'm a graphic designer.
It's almost like you design all my stuff too.
But so this
all my
book
books
is
and the DVD of
Oh
Battleground
no,
Melbourne.
he disagreed. Remember, was his name?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Last
You've
week.
never met me.
He
You've
shut
never
up.
met me. Did he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, weird that.
That selfie shut him right up. But this book I send to my mentees, right? And I go, we're going to work through this book together. We're going to do a chapter at a time. You would be surprised, and I'm telling you, I baby these people. When I say baby, I hold their hand. I want you to do well. I don't want you to come away from my mentorship and be like, oh, she was shit.
Hang on. And just to buttress that point, you've literally got a table here showing like beginner, intermediate, and advanced sort of rates, what they can charge people, how to figure out their prices. Like you are literally going, and with actual dollar figures. Like you're actually going into detail here.
This is 20 years of my experience in the creative industry.
Yeah.
And what I find is people are like, oh, can we get to the part where we're like doing the Instagram reels, or can we get to the bit where we do this? I'm like, no, you are going to do this.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is rapport with your clients, reputation, and the way you treat people when you have them in your midst.
Yes.
And everyone just doesn't want to focus on the sexy stuff.
Yeah.
And I see this time and time again. I've stopped mentoring for a bit because it was actually
Doing your head in?
Yeah, it was quite frustrating because, the whole lead a horse to water and you can't make a drink.
Yes.
And so now I'm like, you know what? Here's the book. You guys can buy it. It's $35. You can download it, work through it at your own pace. But I guarantee you, if you come to me and say you can't make money, you haven't done everything in that book, because most people don't want to, because it's unsexy, right?
Actually impressive.
Thank you.
Actually impressive. I like it.
But yeah, this is what I've realised with a lot of Aussies, and something just happened in my partner's business where he had a team member who basically oversold themselves, super confident. I want to come in, I want to do all this. And what G does is quite specific. So you can have like a general understanding of what he does, but, you're going to have to learn all the nuances of what he does, right?
Yeah.
And so this particular team member came in and talked themselves up. I'm super keen. I'll do Saturdays. I'll work really hard. 4 months later, hasn't worked a single Saturday, and then argues he's not getting enough money. And this person leaves work early because needs to pick up the kid, or, isn't feeling well, or has a concert to go to. That was my favourite. I've got a concert to go to.
Oh, that's, yeah.
So
because that's more important.
Early.
So hang on. I'm not earning enough, but I've spent money on concert tickets, which is why I have to leave work early so I earn even less.
The extracurricular activities of the child were also quite questionable. Turns out that spending all of your money is a recipe to not having any money.
Oh, is that what I've been doing wrong all this time?
Crazy.
See, here's a funny thing. People talk about, there should be a living wage. The dignity of the way. If you're working a full-time job, you should be able to afford to live. Well, sure, at some level, you can. It doesn't mean you should be able to afford a 4-bedroom recent house, in good condition in a desirable suburb.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you should be able to go and have expensive hobbies. And also, actually, I disagree with this premise that every job should pay a living wage. We need starter jobs. We need those first jobs that people go into when they're a teenager still living with mum and dad. And when we're accepting people like that, we can't pay normal rates. We can't pay as much as we pay. If we're paying full price, we'll get someone with experience. Thank you very much. That's the trade-off. We will take someone who needs to be taught and trained and learn all the basics, show up on time, be well presented, be nice to the customers, clean up after yourself, like the basic stuff. It's not the job skills. It's just kind of life skills in a job context. We'll take you and we'll teach you those things, but we're not paying you full rate, because if we can pay you full rate, we'll get someone who's already got those skills, right? So I actually disagree with this idea that you should be able to live off any full-time job. I think that premise is incorrect. But this idea that we have that, well, I work full-time, so I should be able to have almost, whatever hobby. I should be able to travel overseas at least once a year. I should be able to do all these things. No. No, the world doesn't owe you. And if you've picked, you cannot consume, as a species, we cannot consume more than we create.
Yeah.
Okay? We very quickly run out of stuff and go into poverty if we do. As individuals, if your job does not create enough value for you to for the amount that you want to consume, find another job that creates more value for the world.
There's got to be incentive there to actually want to see that reward for the effort that you're putting in. Otherwise, why would you bother, right? And I see this often, I can only talk about my industry, but, photographers who want to charge $5,000 a day, I'm like, okay, so what are you doing for $5,000? Because there's a million talented photographers. Talent isn't rare. I know people like to think that. And what's that old saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard?
Yes.
It's so true. You can be a less than good photographer. You can be an average photographer, but treat people exceptionally and have impeccable service and make far more money than the most talented photographer.
Deliver on time, on spec.
Yeah.
Especially for larger clients, the ultimate creativity and spark and X factor is less important because the photography in this particular case, but this is true of any industry, is a part of a much bigger process. Yeah. And if you can't deliver on spec, on budget and on time, you create all sorts of other problems that are worth way more than just your fee as the photographer.
Well, you know that triad of good, cheap, fast.
Cheap,
yeah. And I always say that to people, I am not cheap. Yeah. And I am expensive relative to cheaper photographers. But what you will get from me is exceptional and fast. That's what I guarantee. If you want to pay less, you're not going to get fast.
No.
You know what?
No, you go to the back.
Yeah.
Go to the back of the queue.
And this is what people don't realise as well. If you want to have that exceptional talent, you have to incentivise it, which is, was it Vivek Ramaswamy who had that massive meltdown on the, not him, but people around him, because he came out saying the reason the H1B1 visa exists is to bring in exceptional people.
Yeah.
And it's not saying that Americans can't be exceptional. It's just that they're
not the only exceptional people in the world.
Yeah. Well, there's complacency. And I see this in Aussies. I go really hard on Aussies. I know that because we've had it too good for too long. And it's made us complacent and lazy. And you see this all the time. I just told you the story about the migrants. You'll see this with, it could be an Indian, it could be an Italian, it could be a Brazilian. It doesn't matter where they come from. The truth is the stakes are high for them because they've lived in the squalor. They've known proper poverty. You think poverty is not being able to have 17 different subscriptions running at the same time. Yeah. You think poverty is not being able to have a brand new car. Yeah. Right? To these guys, it's the difference between can we get running water, right? That's...
I love when, it's usually white people. I'm going to complain about white people for a second.
You racist.
Yeah, I know. I love when they're complaining I ordered food and it was, the delivery driver was Indian. Of course, they're all Indian. I'm like, yeah, because they show up and work. And right, and you go yourself to pick up your food, and while you make your order, you sit there and wait and watch. And while you're waiting, half a dozen or a dozen or 2 dozen, depending on how busy the place is, delivery drivers will come and pick up that food and take it to some probably white person sitting on their butt who doesn't want to even pick up their own food and certainly won't get a job delivering somebody else's. Yeah. I'm like, you can complain all you want. Oh, the migrants are doing all the cleaning. Yeah, because you don't want to.
You won't do
it. Now, I don't have a problem with that in the sense that if they're working some other more productive job, which if you've grown up with the language and the contacts and everything else, you should be by now in your life at a higher level than that. But if you're sitting on your ass on welfare, complaining about the migrants doing the delivery work,
a low-paying job,
I will yeet you off this continent. I will get you the first few meters to your new home somewhere else. Just F off.
I think it's relativity, and I see this so often. They're taking our jobs, whatever. Some of my favourite jobs were shittiest jobs. My first job was Macca's, loved it.
Yeah.
Loved Macca's.
Yeah.
And then I worked in so I went to uni in Warrnambool at Deakin, and Port Fairy is where all the holiday houses are. And my friend's dad owned the real estate agency, which did all the property management for the short stay rentals. And so as, what were we, 18 to 21, over the summer, we used to clean those short stay rentals.
Yeah.
We got paid $15 cash in hand
Yeah.
for however many hours. And we were willingly doing more. We would do every bloody house we could.
Yeah.
We worked for like a 10-hour day because we were getting so much cash.
Yeah.
We were pumped.
Yeah.
You know, and summers were our favourite. Port Fairy's, and all these houses are right on the beach. So we'd finish cleaning for the day and just piss off into the beach.
Yeah.
You
Go
know,
for a swim.
it was the best job I ever had. I was cleaning toilets, and like not only that, poor broke uni student. A lot of these rich people would hire out these houses and leave the fridge full.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I'll take those eggs. I'll take that.
Well, my favourite job that I've ever had was working in a warehouse. I loved it. I couldn't follow me home. It just, once you clock off, you're gone, you're done. But actually recently I helped out a friend who they sell bicycles, and they had a bit of a rush going on, and their team was so busy serving customers and servicing bikes and doing all the other stuff, they just couldn't build the bikes out of the boxes to replace the ones that were missing from the showroom floor. And so I spent a few days in there building bikes. I loved that. I just mindless, stick some music in my ears, build the bikes, make sure all the brakes aren't rubbing and the gears are working perfectly and everything's adjusted nicely, and just do it and do it again and do it again and do it again and do it again.
I love manual labour.
Mechanical, anything mechanical, love
There's
it.
something about it. Like, I have built 2 photography studios now. The moving and the building is my favourite part.
Moving.
Moving.
Moving. Sorry,
Moving all the heavy stuff, building it, sweeping, cleaning. Yeah. I love, part of me wants to be...
You can come and sweep and clean my studio if you want. I mean, that is in desperate need of a sweep and a clean.
Do you know what I would really think... No, enjoy is probably the wrong word. It would satisfy me is, you know how people do those trauma cleans, and they'll go to either a deceased estate or a hoarder or even a crime site, a
crime scene,
crime scene clean. And, they have all the stuff that they need. They put a suit on and off they go and they clean it. There's something rewarding in doing that work.
Yeah.
One of the best books I've ever read, Trauma Cleaner, Susan Cranston, I think her name is.
Right.
Trans person. Talks about her life, OG trans, right? So she called herself a transvestite. Worked in Kalgoorlie as a prostitute, did all these things, and then somehow found herself working as a trauma cleaner. Wow. But has developed such empathy from her life.
Yeah.
I think she grew up in Footscray, when it was a dock.
Sort of commission housing.
Yeah. Guys, if you haven't read it, The Trauma Cleaner is fascinating. And just the way she talks about that service of doing those things, I was like, there's something about that. I really resent days when I'm stuck behind the computer.
It's funny. So, I found myself telling one of my kids, you spend your life on a screen. And he kind of looked at me, he's like, but Dad, you're on your screen all the time. I'm like, well, yes, I do make my money on my screen. That's true. Yes.
I'm losing this argument.
Writing things and making people angry and recording videos and editing them all involve screens. So you're right. Turns out you can make all your money on not that I make much, but you can.
It's just it's not the be all end all.
It doesn't replace getting outside, going for walks. I play a bit of tennis and it just always feels so good.
My new favourite thing's gardening.
Yeah.
And gardening's it's hard. It's sucks. You're out in the sun, you're out in the wind, out in the cold, you get your hands dirty.
You really are getting old, aren't you?
I am. I've turned into everything I used to despise.
Making sourdough bread.
Tread wife.
Just growing pumpkins.
There's something in it. We were talking about success when we opened this podcast. I think if you were to ask, say, Mike Cannon-Brookes or Jeff Bezos or any of those people who have become incredibly successful, their most fond memories will be when they're sleeping on someone's couch. They've got no money in their bank account, but they're hustling.
Yeah.
I imagine, and I'm pretty sure that'll be their favourite memories. It was the journey to their success.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of Aussies tend to not think about. I've seen this now. I think I told you about the chick that I hired. She was my assistant for a little while and did the OnlyFans. That was the attitude. If I can't buy a Gucci bag for my job, then this is a shit job. I'm like... But we're going to wrap it up, but we're going to do some rapid fire. So I'm going to pull up X. So obviously the JFK files have come out today.
We haven't read them because they came out only shortly before we started recording. So we'll have a look at them. They'd better not have botched this up again. They'd please, for the love of all that is good, please let them have actually just not screwed this one up.
So Rukshan, shout out to Rukshan. Oh no, come back. I've obviously refreshed it.
He was talking about the fact that actually, in amongst all of it, we discovered that ASIO, the Australian government, the Australian intelligence community, requested specific things to not be released. Now, I didn't understand whether that was historically back when it happened or whether that was current when they knew that they were going to get released.
Yeah.
Do you have any detail on that?
No, that was exactly the post I was about to read. I'm kind of like...
Give us some time. We'll look into it.
There's 80,000 pages.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know if I care.
So what's interesting to me is that it was intimated pretty clearly, I thought. Like, it wasn't outright said, but it was intimated pretty clearly in a press conference at the White House by the press secretary that there were 2 shooters. Now, that's... For me, if that turns out to be true, well, then I'm interested. Because clearly the official narrative does not hold anymore and there really is another story yet to be told.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things I'm like, they're never going to tell us that the CIA did it, are they?
The thing with it is everyone involved is dead. Not just JFK. Obviously, he was the first. But the rest of them over the decades followed. None of them are still alive. And so... surely you could tell, if you were going to tell the truth about anything, surely that would be it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
It's interesting.
Time will tell.
Next one is Sarah Abdu Lebdeh, the chick who was famously known as saying she's killing Israeli patients.
Oh, yes, yep.
She had a court appearance, and this is currently what's happening. It's her walking out of court, flanked by a bunch of, what I'm going to say, friends, family, trying to protect her from...
media and people. Yeah.
Funny that when you threaten to kill people, people are outraged.
Yeah, not a lot of sympathy. It took them a long time. So she was the one that got charged first, and then the guy was charged.
The guy? I haven't.
Yeah, so they have both been charged now. Obviously, that'll just play out. I'm not going to follow that particularly closely. I'm just going to let that play out and just keep an eye on it from time to time. These things tend to be multiple court appearances, mention hearings and scheduling for this and that, and we're waiting on this thing to happen and blah blah blah. So I'm just going to let that play out in the background.
Yeah. The takedown of Elon Musk and Tesla, the domestic terrorism. I'm just reading a tweet here. It says Elon is now only 90 away from a margin call as he loses another 12% today. I'm getting giddy. I can't wait to see Tesla go.
Yeah, so this is interesting. This is basically they're trying to redo what they did with GameStop. You remember the GameStop thing where they found out that a whole bunch of hedge funds were shorting GameStop, so they wanted the stock to drop, and so then people jumped in and started buying it, so to push the price up and make the hedge funds lose money, and it got really, really messy. This is essentially a whole bunch of people trying to use the stock market for activism purposes, and that's not illegitimate, by the way. That is one of the ways that we can peacefully express our opinion, and boycotts and so forth are completely legitimate. Yeah. However, what's not legitimate is the arrival of the violence, people burning the Tesla vehicles, assaulting people. A lot of this stuff is just real nonsense. You see in the UK, there's some sort of a clandestine funding for a big campaign where they're putting up posters, calling it the swastika and all that sort of stuff. But I'm seeing a lot of these sorts of memes around, if the stock drops by a certain amount, then he'll get margin calls and his whole empire will collapse and blah, blah, blah. And look, most likely he is leveraged. Most likely he is at risk of margin calls if the stocks drop by enough. Yes, sales figures are very, very poor. Is there a possibility that they could actually accomplish this? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Very unlikely. The likelihood that taking out Tesla would then knock out his various other endeavours, unlikely. SpaceX is tremendously profitable. Mm-hmm. They get paid big money to take payloads up into space. The Starlink, I believe, has now crossed the profitability threshold if they were to stop just launching new ones relentlessly, if they just if they just maintained the network rather than expanding it. So he's got some depth in defence, so to speak, multiple layers of wealth. But Tesla is the big one. But I need to look this up, actually. I'm not sure that Tesla has ever turned a profit, has it? Can you grok that for me? Let's use grok to find out whether Tesla has ever turned a profit. I know a lot of these companies, they have massive market capitalizations and they have enormous turnovers, but they don't actually necessarily turn a profit.
Let's ask Grok. Grok knows everything. Yes, Tesla returned a profit multiple times. The company first achieved profitability in Q3 2019.
So quite recent then, and it's done it a few times since then. Okay.
So
it's on and off. It's profitable on and off. All right.
Yeah.
So they have kind of reached that point. Look, I have no particular love for electric cars. I think that they are environmental vandalism. I think that they are entrenching and increasing dependence on blood cobalt from the Congo. There's all kinds of angles from which I have no particular love for them. So I'm not going to cry if Tesla goes out of business. But it is concerning to see Musk being targeted in this particular way. But this is also, this is a part of the battle of ideas. Like, I'm sorry, even though I'm on his side, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, they can't do that. Yes, they can do that. Apart from the burning, the actual vandalism and the burning, that's criminal. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. The boycotting, the choosing not to buy a Tesla, bashing up your own Tesla for the views on YouTube, blah, 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 all of that's completely legitimate. That is part of the contest of ideas. Musk can be his own worst enemy at times.
Yeah.
And trolling the world, it turns out, can have consequences. If I'm going to say fuck around, find out when it happens the other way, well, I need to be consistent and say, well, there's a certain degree of fuck around, find out going on here.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to take him out.
All right, next one. A federal judge has blocked Donald Trump executive order banning transgender people from military service.
So judges are now trying to basically govern the country. So this is really interesting to me, and what we're running into is a really interesting collision here, because Democrats and Republicans alike have concentrated more and more power into the office of the president, to the point that the president is basically a short-term dictator. That's what America has become, and neither of them had a problem with that until Trump came along. Judges didn't feel the need to inject themselves into every single decision until Trump came along. Now, where this gets really interesting for me is Trump turned around and said some fairly colourful things about a circuit court judge, in relation to the USAID funding, which this circuit court judge said had to be restored. Different issue, but similar mechanism at work. And then one of the Supreme Court justices, I think it might have been Roberts, but one of the Supreme Court justices has come out and slapped Musk down. Sorry, not Musk, slapped Trump down.
Thank you. Yeah.
We've been talking for too long. Excuse me. This is going to get messy. And the biggest problem for Trump isn't actually having judges upset with him, it's time.
Yeah.
If they successfully bog him down and stall his momentum, that becomes a really, really big problem.
Well, this has also come out today. Judge blocks USAID dismantling.
Yeah. So that's the one that I'm talking about. And then Trump responded to that very colourfully, and then one of the Supreme Court judges has slapped him down. That was all unfolding as I was on the train. So I'm not really across it at this moment in time. There's some concerning things there. This is judicial activism. Judges don't get to decide the law, they adjudicate according to the law. Now, we can argue about whether that's the way it should be or whether that's the way it shouldn't be, but that's the way it is right now. And US judges do seem to be overstepping that, but the unfortunate reality of a justice system, or the way the courts work, is if you have a problem with the courts, who do you have to go to? A different court. Yeah. And they tend to be a club. They side with each other. Yeah.
Another one that's popped out, this is all the JFK stuff, obviously people going through it. JFK Jr., so JFK's son, called Biden a traitor in released JFK files dated to 1994. Dear Senator Biden, you are a traitor. That's in the documents.
Wow.
The intrigue.
Yeah, look, I'm going to let other people go trawling through that. We've got local issues, but as juicy stuff emerges, I will repost it on all of my socials.
Yeah, I think, we'll just pay attention to it. This is the problem with the news cycle. It is just going at warp speed.
But we're also paying attention to so much more of the planet. Yeah. The news cycle used to be your local newspaper and maybe a national newspaper. Yeah. And now we're hoovering up citizen journalism from every 100%. Corner of the planet and feeding it into our faces.
And the good thing is, people seem to get fixated on one particular topic. So, that person might focus on that person focuses on that. So you're able to get deep dives from different people. Yeah. Whereas,
and they really get across it in detail, whereas someone like myself, I'm aggregating 100 different topics in a day.
Yeah, same. And that's kind of something that's what I'm interested to see what's unfolding. I don't necessarily need all the
So those people uncover all the details, and then people like you and I essentially curate and say, well, that doesn't seem that relevant to us. Oh, that does, etc. And sort of cultivate and curate a feed of what's going on in the world according to what we think matters.
Yeah. Interestingly, we'll end on this one. My favourite senator, Miss Lydia Thorpe.
Of course.
Who just 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago said it was only 300 children, and Labor was treasonous for going back to their original bail laws, which they relaxed.
Right.
Because it's only 300 children. Just murdering people using machetes and breaking into
Sorry,
houses.
sorry. Where did she say this?
3 weeks ago, she said it's just 300 children.
That seems to support the idea that if we just cracked down on 300 individuals, a lot of these problems would go away. I don't think that does what she thinks it does.
No, she was saying that I'm trying to find the tweet. Like she there's a lot on here, but she's going on about Gaza. But she basically said that it's complete overreaction. It was treasonous that she's going back. It's unreasonable, and that she's very against the new bail laws.
Good for her.
Yeah. But then she's come out today. I'm just trying to read this quickly. I just saw it pop up. Hang on. Where I'm calling for the federal government to fund therapeutic bail services to reduce the number of children and adults jailed, unsentenced, and ensure that those on bail get supervision and support. This national crisis needs national action. She's calling for the Albanese government to fund universal access to therapeutic bail supports to reduce the number of children being jailed.
National crisis of what? What is she defining as the crisis? Because I suspect it's not the crisis of law-abiding citizens having their home broken into or their car stolen or getting run over by high-speed cars blasting through intersections without stopping. I'm guessing that's not the crisis that she's expressing concern for.
The 300 children that shouldn't be jailed because
we just shouldn't.
Yeah, ethnicity. Do you know, I just find that so reductive when every conversation that we have is reduced to immutable characteristics.
But it's the tyranny of low expectations. It's literally saying you are not capable as a human being of living up to the same expectations as we would expect of white people because you're a brown person. Yeah. It is racism writ large.
Oh, but that's their whole thing, right? Hypocrisy. I wrote something on my ex, and I thought we'd end with this because we've kind of talked about this. And one of you guys commented last week, and I want to say thank you. I can't remember who it was, but you told me about a documentary called Why Beauty Matters. It was by a guy called Roger. It was a documentary that came out in 2009, British dude, conservative philosopher, talking about how basically...
Older guy, Roger Scruton?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
And sorry, I forgot his name. No. Anyway, and I watched the documentary and it just really sparked my thinking because obviously, as I said, doing my masters, and I was struggling, and this makes a good point, I promise. I was struggling with the fact that I still wanted to create beautiful artwork, even though I was talking about something that is an ugly topic. And I was like, hang on a minute, I'm questioning beauty standards, but I still want to take beautiful photos. Yeah. I was really challenged by this. I was like, what do I want to do? And I'm like, no, I think I need to argue for beauty. Yeah. I think I need to argue that beauty is needed, right? So I went down this whole big rabbit hole. Thank you so much for that documentary. I really appreciate it. But as I was saying before we jumped on this podcast, we are currently living through a modern dark age where innovation's been stifled. We're seeing brutalist architecture take over. It's all about sort of reductive everything. You can't have any flourish. Everything's got to be like bold and dark and gloomy and urban and, I'm a colour person and I often get told that my work's garish. It's too bright. I was like, that's because you're used to this neutral trend. Do you notice how everything was neutral? Yeah, yes. Everything's beige. But I basically talked about how, where are we? The progressive left are aiming for stagnation, right? They despise hard work. I'm just going to read it what I wrote because it makes sense. Progress isn't their goal, stagnation is. They despise hard work, discipline, and personal ambition because they lack it in themselves. Instead of striving to improve, they seethe with resentment at those who do. The answer, tear everything down. If they can't rise, no one can. Success, wealth, and even the simple joys of life, owning a home, upgrading your car, and growing your own food must be demonized. If you're comfortable, if you've built something for yourself, you must be punished. This is communism in its purest form, forced equity at the lowest common denominator. And once you see it, you can't see it, you can't unsee it. I've talked about the trans stuff, I've talked about the assault on capitalism, but I do really think that people have had a gutful of being perpetually bogged down with like the world's issues. They're fatigued, everything's hysterical, everyone's Hitler.
Everything's over the top.
Yeah. And it was interesting because I think escapism is, we talk about escapism from drugs and alcohol, but people don't have the opportunity to do things for pleasure anymore.
So there's an interesting correlation when you look at the entertainment industry between how dark the world is and how light the entertainment is. And this penchant that we've had in the last few decades for turning everything dark, it's the dark Batman, it's the dark superhero era, has largely been because the world has actually been pretty jolly good. Yeah. If you have a look at entertainment during the Second World War or the First World War or during really big times of upheaval, you get things like the Three Stooges. You get things like your slapstick comedy, your Charlie Chaplins. This is what we see emerge during those times. The entertainment that we remember tends to be entertainment of great beauty and great comedy.
Yeah.
And there's a lightness and there's a joy that emerges in entertainment. And then when we have good times, I think the economy's fine, there aren't big wars to worry about, blah, blah, blah. It's almost like human nature goes looking for something dark. We almost like need that. And so that's where our entertainment turns really dark and gloomy and introspective and depressing, and everyone turns out to be evil in the end kind of entertainment emerges actually during good times. So I would say the definition of beauty, or the pursuit of beauty and what that looks like, is going to change considerably with time, not only as obviously generations change, but even within a generation, as the wider economy changes, as geopolitics changes, we will change what we're looking for.
So what you're saying is, I'm at the introductory stage of the bell curve. I'm at the innovator and disruptor side.
I would say so, but also you've potentially, if you play your cards right, like a good academic, you can squeeze an entire career out of one topic just by always holding this narrative. It's always evolving. It's always changing. Yes, I know I've released this same report with slight tweaks for 20 years, and you've paid me $250,000 each time to do it, but things have changed this year again. You have to, my master's thesis, I need another grant.
Oh God, I couldn't think of anything worse. It's funny because we were talking about professional academia, and one of my lecturers was like, "Well, once you've got your masters, you're actually qualified to go and teach." And I was like, I couldn't think of anything less I want to do than go back into the system.
Yeah, go back into that. Yeah.
But that's what they do. So,
but a lot of it's Ponzi scheme, where the degree itself, the only thing it's useful for is to teach more people, who will then get a degree that is only useful to teach more people, who, etc. It's just a Ponzi scheme.
100%. And that's not why I did it. I did it because I was like, I wanted that level of, credibility to speak with authority on things.
The street cred that comes with it.
Street cred. Oh, she's got a master's. She must be smart.
Oh, yes.
What they don't know is I'm actually a dumbass. Anyway,
I think I've seen your trolls pointing that out. Yeah.
There's a lot of truth in what they say, let's be honest. Wouldn't be offensive otherwise, would it?
That's right. Has to be the kernel of truth.
I'm going to do one last little, I call it like a spin the wheel. So I've got to get back up to the top of my X and do the old swiperoo. Do you know, I love how X just gives you the weirdest shit sometimes. They swipe, and then you see something, you're like, I don't know if I was meant to see that. They're talking about ASIO, youth crime, surprise.
I think we're good. Let's come back next week.
Yeah, nothing news has happened.
Yeah.
I did like this. Let's end on this note, because you posted this. I've seen this graphic go around, this one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The podcast sphere, which is what we're doing.
Yes, we are a podcast now. Our names will be on that graph at some point in the future.
For those who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm basically referring to this graph that came out that showed that right-leaning or centrist podcasts dominate the independent media space.
It's basically a picture where every sort of right-leaning podcast is in red and the left-leaning podcasts are in blue, and the size of the blob represents the size of the audience, and it's a sea of red with some dots of blue spread amongst it.
And that is our plan.
We will be the biggest blob.
We'll be the biggest blob, and bigger than just Australia. America, we're coming.
Yeah, we're coming for you.
I'm coming for that green card.
Yeah. And I want to learn Spanish because I want the Spanish-speaking market as well, because you guys be crazy in a good way.
I have tried. I love
Spanish. It's the one language I pick up. I pick it up so quick.
Really?
Yeah.
I was learning on Duolingo, and I got up to about a year into it, and I just it's hard. It's I think I'll do better speaking to someone.
I spent 2 weeks in South America, and I wasn't conversational, but I was the essential stuff. I could communicate and understand.
It's hard to just, but I'd love to.
I love Spanish.
All right, guys, on that note, we'll see you in the next one. Oh, like, comment, share,
all
subscribe.
The stuff. Where can they get your merch? Where can they get one of your
I don't know.
thingies?
Should I make them? I only made one for me.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, do you want to add it to my store, and then that way we can?
Do you guys, I don't know. Would you guys buy one of these?
You tell us. Can you hold up the back of the hoodie again? That hoodie is. The hoodie's awesome.
It's funny.
Hoodie's very.
It's very niche.
If you ever do any photography, you need that hoodie. That is very, very funny.
I should probably do a collection of them. It's not my original idea. I just didn't say that. I did see something similar for a different industry, and I was like, I can make that funny.
Yeah.
But you
did it for your industry.
I do know a thing or two about apparel.
Yes, I've apparently you know apparel. You can go to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com to get all of my good stuff. I love wearing this when I come to Melbourne because there's all the security cameras everywhere.
It is very funny.
It's very funny. And my books and my DVDs.
Yeah. Got to grift. If we didn't grift, we wouldn't.
That's right. Yeah. At Topher Field.
At Carlz J Soda. Follow me on X, follow me on YouTube, follow you on X, follow you on YouTube. You don't use Instagram, do you?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I do all the things.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, guys, on that note, see you next time. All right.
All righty,
Ooh,
doty.
that was 2 hours and maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.